It's 7 o'clock on May 21st, and we are here to begin the Planning Commission meeting for tonight. So the first thing to do is please call the roll.
Here.
Here. Okay, thank you. We want to now entertain public comments on non-agenda items. If something not on the agenda that anybody in the audience wants to comment upon, now is the time.
Approval of the agenda.
Right.
Okay. Has everybody read the agenda? Yeah. Are there any comments or questions?
I don't have a problem with that.
So, do I hear a motion
I
to
move approval.
second? Second?
I'll second that.
All in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Thank you. And so were there any public comments on non-agenda items? Apparently not. Okay, so we will move on to something that is wonderful, actually, and that is to provide a proclamation of the Fairfax Planning Commission to Roxanne Etzet, if you stand, please, who has served on this commission from March 16, 2013 through March 19, 2015. And whereas Roxanne Etzet, is that correct pronunciation, has worked tirelessly and in the best interests of the community and its residents, and whereas the only commissioner formally educated in the planning field, Roxanne used her PhD in urban and regional planning, often providing broader and far-reaching viewpoint on the purpose of everyday regulations and state planning law. And we are going to miss you from not providing that any longer. Whereas Roxanne has reviewed and acted on a wide range of planning projects and issues, including but not limited to amending the noise ordinance to include regulations for using leaf blowers and other power tools, a mural on the side of the Fairfax Theater, a portable classroom for Cascade Canyon School, review of the Good Earth conditions for approval due to noise complaints and controversial general plan driven rezoning of the highway commercial zones to central commercial. And whereas Roxanne has provided an example of professionalism and dedication to her fellow commissioners, citizens, and staff, and whereas Roxanne was a shining example of a citizen serving in a volunteer position, standing unbendingly for the principles of good government and for environmental protection, and whereas Roxanne is having to relocate and therefore regrettably had to step down from service on the commission as of March 19th, but would be welcome back in a heartbeat. Would you relocate back to town? And whereas Roxanne leaves her position as planning commissioner with the heartfelt admiration and thanks of her fellow commissioners and the town hall staff. Now therefore be it resolved that Roxanne Etzet be commended for her years of dedicated service to the town, where she gave freely of her time and planning expertise to make Fairfax a better place. The foregoing resolution was unanimously adopted by the Planning Commission on today, 23rd day of April, 2015.
Big shoes to follow, Phil.
That's for sure. Okay.
We'll wait for Shelley to get up there. Well, that was very sweet, and I'm someone who always can talk, and now you guys have me choked up. I'm bittersweet. I've enjoyed being on the commission and the Affordable Housing Committee before I left out of town. I firmly believe in the political process and civic engagement. and I'm a volunteer of volunteers. But I think it's a great showcase of our town that we have so many people that are involved and politically active and come here and come to town council to voice their opinions. And while at times it's really challenging to come to consensus, I think bringing people together and having that dialogue is important, and it shows that our process is working. And while consensus is challenging, in the end, the programs and the policies that our town and legislatures come up with are more reflective of what our community wants and needs. So I've been happy to be part of that. For long-timers who have been on here for a long time and new faces. It's an amazing job, and you're donating hours and time away from family and friends and work to give of yourselves, and to our professional planning staff who give much more than the call of duty to be here. I thank you all. It's a wonderful town. I'm sad that I've moved away and I had to step down, but thank you all.
Okay, thank you. And you know, please let us know when you move back to town. Okay, we'll move on now to what we call the consent items. These are items that have been basically approved by staff, and we call for any members of the public who might have any comments on the items. Now, the first one, 24 Iron Springs, I have to recuse because I live within 300 feet. So I'm going to step away, and the vice chair will take over for this project. Thank you.
Okay. So, as described earlier, consent items we approve. We've got 2 consent items, and we tend to approve them in a batch unless there's some reason why somebody is here to ask a question or make a comment about, or a commissioner who thinks that they ought to be taken off of the agenda.
And staff can entertain any technical questions that the
Or staff could.
commissioners or the audience might have,
Right.
without having to pull it to answer technical questions.
Sure. So any kind of questions, but if we get into the content or substance, then what we would need to do would be to pull it off of the consent calendar and put it on as a hearing item. But if we don't have any questions and there's no one from the audience who needs, there's someone from the audience who has a question. Come up and state your name and
My name is Louise Aliano. I live at 85 Bethune Road, so I'm a neighbor to 24 Iron Springs Road. And I have no problem with the extension that they're talking about here. But my concern is, do permits have a time limit? Because it seems like I've been living with construction for about 2 years, and I know that that remodeling is so unpredictable, and you can't get any more unpredictable than the unfortunate fire. So I understand that that could add time, but what I'm wondering is there a limit to construction?
I'll turn that over to our
Some communities have adopted time limits during which people are supposed to finish projects. I think Tiburon has one, but Fairfax has never put one in place.
Okay, because on the bottom of my building permit, when I've gotten permits, it says 180 days it can be extended one time, but not again. So that doesn't apply.
No, and I think, I don't
Okay.
know how it's written on the building permit, but what that refers to is once you get a building permit, you need to call every 180 days for an inspection, or the permit expires and you have to reactivate it.
Okay.
And that's in the building code.
All right, then my other question is, again, there can be no more alarming thing than to wake up with your house on fire. I can't imagine how frightening a situation that is. But I did not hear a fire alarm. I can hear chickens when I wake up in the morning, I can hear the chickens, but I could not hear a fire alarm. And that frightens me, because if the house isn't lived in right now, and I don't know whether or not it is, if it catches on fire again and the cause of the fire is up for neighborhood rumor, I would just like an operating fire alarm so I could hear it. So,
We can have the building inspector look into that and, you know, make sure that the required fire alarms are installed
Okay,
ASAP.
that's part of it, okay.
Hi, my name is Carol Vasali. I live at 83 Bothine. Our house is directly behind 24 Iron Springs. Basically the same kind of concerns that Louise expressed. Nobody's here to be the, you know, the pushy neighbor or, you know, cause any trouble, but this has gone on for a really long time. And my question is, from my understanding of the building permit that I saw, the permit was granted for interior work. And we have pictures actually of the exterior of the house, which includes scaffolding and, well, a lot of stuff.
So I'm just going to direct a lot of the process comments about construction, noise, whether a permit is going on as it's supposed to be. The staff has been excellent in the past of mediating and is always very helpful to work with neighbors to work things like that out. They can have the fire department come out and look at things for fire alarms and things like that. So any kind of the process stuff, definitely neighbors working together with the assistance of the staff. Won't hold up approval of the project, but certainly working together, they've solved a whole lot of problems like that.
Nobody wants to hold up any work on the house, I can tell you that right now. So we're really interested in getting things moving along.
Then what I would suggest is we can go through with the consent and do the approval and then have neighbors and folks work with staff. And if you want
That's
to say,
great, because we don't know how it works. We're not, you know, we've never done anything like this before, and we don't, you know, we don't know those guys. That's it basically. We got questions for you guys then.
And
so how's that work?
if I could add that, you know, we always welcome people contacting us and sharing their
So
concerns.
that's
And we're available at Town Hall. I'm Jim Moore, and this is Linda Neal.
Okay.
And you can get us by phone, email, or at the front counter.
Gotcha.
And we welcome your heads up on anything going on, so thank you.
Okay, so what we have to show tonight, we would just show you
Sure, come
the
on in.
pictures, the video of the fire and all that kind of stuff.
We're open Monday through Thursday.
That's what we need to know. That's it.
Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot.
And thank you for coming and voicing your concerns.
would you like to do a public service announcement in general when you're open and how people can come in? We have one more. Is this okay? Go ahead and press the button there.
Oh, okay. Michael Aronson, 89 Laurel Drive. I live about 2 houses away from 11 Pine Drive. And I totally embrace this whole project. My only question has to do with the necessity of excavating the hillside across the street 40 feet for a fire engine turnout. I looked at the packet, and there were references made to the necessity of having access within 150 feet of all aspects of the building. But I don't see how a turnout accomplishes that. I mean, a pullout accomplishes that across the street. It would seem like it would be easier just to pull up in front of the residence.
Let me. Sure.
And
I'll,
it's probably a stupid question.
No, it's
So,
not. It's,
go ahead.
It's a state of California fire code requirement now that when projects are considered 50% remodels, that they widen the road, however they can do it, somewhere along the property frontage or across the street, so that there's at least 20 feet of width for the fire trucks. And that serves not just for this house, it serves the whole neighborhood. It's a place for cars to pass if the hills start on fire. It'll be marked for no parking. People can't park there. It's a passing zone. It's a place for the fire trucks to stop if this house burns, but it's also a way for cars to get in and out to other houses that are further in. And it's being required on all our projects now. Sometimes people can provide it on the side that the house is on. Sometimes it's just better and easier to do it across the street. In this case, to do it on their side would push their parking deck further out onto the site, and it would exceed height limits. So they chose to propose it across the street, which was accepted by the Ross Valley Fire Department, but they didn't want to do it. It's being driven by the fire code.
I would just add Madam Chair, that for point of information, that just so you know, the fire department here is part of a joint fire district. And so we put these plans out to the Ross Valley Fire Department. They're an independent agency from the town, and then they do the analysis based on the fire code and come back with whether they agree with something, an application or not, or recommend changes. So in this case, as Linda said, this was routed to them. The proposal called for it being across the street, and they accepted it. So we're really at the mercy of the fire department and their call on the code requirements. But they are getting more onerous over time, and in the interest of providing more safety.
Okay, thank you.
So just for folks in the audience to know, if you look at the applications that we look through, there's often at the end of the application, there will be information about the different agencies that have their own sets of building regulations that are their regulations that we have to adhere to. So that's the Ross Valley Fire Department, the Marin Municipal Water District, and the Sanitary District. So all applications get reviewed through that. So there's some stuff that we have latitude over, and then there's some stuff that we don't.
Good evening, John Scobazzi, 24 Iron Springs Road. And yes, there are no smoke alarms currently in the house. So I will get them in hopefully over the weekend here for sure. So I didn't really dawn on me until tonight. And there were working smoke alarms in the house at the time of the fire, just to the nature of the fire, they just didn't go off.
Okay, and Madam Chair, just point of order for the chair who's returned to the dais. We haven't quite completed the consent calendar yet. So I think you're now at a point of approving consent.
We are now at a point of approving consent. So I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I motion to approve the consent items.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that the chair recused himself.
And the chair recused himself.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you.
And now I will.
Madam Chair, can I just
Yes.
reiterate for the
Oh,
public's good?
so the items that are on the consent calendar have been approved with a
10-day.
10-day appeal period and a $500 appeal fee.
Yeah. Is here for 24 Iron Springs or 11 Pine Drive. They were just approved, and they're over. Thank you.
I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, now we move on to the public hearing items. So the first public hearing item is number 3 on the agenda, 69 Spruce Road. And if we could
Okay.
have our staff report, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so this item was originally scheduled for the April 16th commission meeting. At that meeting, the owner of the neighboring property at 17 Spruce Road indicated to the commission that she had not had time to review the plans and was asking for additional time to allow her engineer to take a look at them. She cited the proximity of the retaining wall to the side of her house and property line, whether the depth of the excavation for the wall might compromise the stability or result in future settlement of her house, and impacts of the wall on existing trees as her concerns. So the commission continued the item to this meeting. So the project encompasses the creation of a 19-foot by 20-foot parking area and relocation of the entry stairs. The improvements will be created by constructing a retaining wall that will vary in height as one travels west on Spruce Road from 7 feet to 4 feet in height. The parking and access stairway improvements are proposed entirely within the public right-of-way. Normally, this type of parking development would require the approval of an encroachment permit and a retaining wall height variance from the commission. However, in 1994, in response to the Oakland Hills fires, the Fairfax Town Council adopted a preferential parking permit process to try to encourage people to construct very expensive parking areas off the paved road to free up our roadways for emergency vehicles in the case of fire. And the ordinance requires that people must spend at least $10,000 or more to create the parking, and then they are allowed to post the parking for their own private use. The provision of parking along this section of Spruce Road where parking is scarce and parked vehicles often narrow the roadway travel path for emergency vehicles will be more beneficial to the general public than the retention of the existing bank and bay trees. So staff had originally recommended approval of this project. However, the neighbor and the owner still haven't reached a compromise point on the project, so the neighbor submitted earlier this week another email reiterating her concerns. And so at this point, there are 3 ways the commission can go forward. The Permit Streamlining Act requires the town to act on a project within 60 days. We're up against that time limit, so the only way the commission can continue the project to a later meeting is if the town, the Planning Commission, and the owner agree to a 90-day continuance under the Permit Streamlining Act. So that's one way to go. The second way to go is the commission could condition the project upon the town engineer reviewing the proposal and the neighbors' concerns and requiring modifications to address those concerns in a way that he sees fit. That could result in a redesign of the project. If it's anything significant, if the wall height changes or the length changes, he doesn't have the authority to approve that, so it might end up back in front of you anyway. The neighbor could also appeal that. The third way would be project denial, and the staff does not recommend that as an option, even though you do have it, because the owners have put considerable money and time into trying to provide this parking area. So I believe the applicant's representatives are here to speak, and I think the neighbors are here as well. So that would conclude our report. We're still recommending approval of the project, and that would conclude our report.
Okay. If the applicant would step forward and provide any testimony about this, and thank you. Could you push the button so the red light goes? Thank you.
Again, my name is Vlad Yoshika. I'm the civil engineer that prepared the plans for these improvements in the public right-of-way. We've been here for the last hearing, and we heard from the complaints from the neighbor and their concerns about the stability of the slope, and willing to address their concerns. We contracted a independent soils consultant. However, time was short and people are busy, so we don't have yet the report to handle to the neighbors. And as soon as available, we'll proceed. But at this time, we only can ask for the project to be postponed or the conversation to be rescheduled. And that's what I can tell to date.
So your client is willing to agree to a continuance?
Client is willing to continue
Okay.
this, yes.
She has to sign a form, which I'll be sending to you, but
Okay.
it sounds like they're willing to agree to a continuance.
Okay, I think that's a great idea because the email from Oliviera Fernando talks about the soils and the runoff and the mud and rock that could potentially, be involved in a runoff. So that's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
But since we're here, you might open the public hearing in case there's other neighbors that might want to get on the record with other issues. Okay.
Just about to do that. Okay. So if even though the project will be continued, if there are any public comments presently, we would like you to keep the comments to about 3 minutes if you could. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tanya Stosky. I am the neighbor at 71 Spruce Road that wrote that nice long email. I just want to make it clear we're in no way against this project. We're for the project. We'd like it to go forward. We just want to get these concerns answered. So we're happy to continue working with the neighbor. We just haven't been able to get the information yet. Our biggest concern is really just our foundation of our house and the impact of the retaining wall and the actual shoring during construction. So those are our big concerns, and you can see the email, I assume, that has kind of the list of all of our other questions. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comments on this project, 69 Spruce Road? Apparently not. So we will continue, and the applicant will sign the form that staff will provide. Moving on to the next.
Does that require an action?
Do we need to?
Yes, you do need to make a motion to continue it.
Let's do that then.
And it would be great if you could continue it to the next meeting date. Then if they aren't ready, we'll continue it again for, they have 90 days, but we'd like to get them done as quickly as possible if we can.
I just wanted to ask that when it comes back to us, I'm going to hope and assume that all the questions are going to be answered sufficiently, and that it'll be fine. If there are, the neighbor provided a whole lot of written, very good questions. So if there are specific things that maybe there's still issues with, this is a really helpful document to go through and just say, they couldn't come to agreement on this one or that one. That would be very helpful for us to know just specifically what are the points of.
We will try to get you something in writing. Sometimes we're getting things like at the final hour, If we have it in time for the packet, we'll do that. If not, it might be a verbal report, but we'll do the best we can to get you something in writing.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, then I'd like to entertain a motion for the continuance of 69 Spruce Road for 90 days based on voluntary agreement of the applicant.
So moved. 90 days or to the next month?
The next meeting.
To the next
The motion until next month.
What is the date of the next?
I don't know. It's 18th, I think.
Okay.
But let's double check.
I move to continue this until our June Planning Commission meeting.
I'll second.
Yeah, June 18th.
June 18th.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 No opposed? Okay, thank you very much.
So, Mr. Chair, I need to recuse myself for the next two items, so I'm going to go ahead and take off
Okay.
for the rest of the meeting.
Take care.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 4, 188 Bothene Road, application number 15-14.
Okay.
Staff report, please.
Yeah, this project encompasses remodeling 336 square feet of the existing 1,549 square foot house and the addition of 853 square feet that will include a new internal stairway to a second story that will contain a study, walk-in closet, master bedroom, and bathroom with a new deck. The addition will result in a 2,403 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath residence. The project constitutes a 50% remodel and requires the approval of the following discretionary permits: a Hill Area Residential Development Permit, a combined side setback variance, and a design review permit. So there's several features of the proposed site that can, oh, no, I don't need to read that. The town engineer has reviewed a number of documents with regards to this project. He's reviewed preliminary development plans, a recorded property survey, an in-depth geotechnical report. The site features that were of main concern to the town engineer were the steeply potential unstable slopes uphill of the site and a natural drainage swale draining the area upslope that at some point prior to this owner buying it had been realigned on the lower portion of the swale to divert water to the side of the site where it runs between this property's garage and the neighboring house. The project geotechnical engineer recommended several modifications to ensure that any sloughing material was diverted between the homes and protected both the homes. So there's 2 debris walls that are going to be incorporated into the project. The swale is going to be improved. And then there's some energy dissipators, one energy dissipator where the water gets between the 2 buildings to slow the water down so it doesn't end up shooting out into Bothene Road. And the mitigation measures that have been incorporated into the project have met with the approval of the town engineer, and he feels the project can go forward and that this property and the neighboring properties are adequately protected from potential sloughing material. So with regards to the combined setback variance, what's driving the need for that is the location of the existing garage in the front corner of the property, only 3.5 feet from the property line. So the code in the 70s, the town adopted minimum setbacks and combined setbacks. And the combined setback for the sides is 20 feet. Very few properties in Fairfax are able to comply with that combined setback. It was a pretty typical way to develop a site to put the garage detached from the house at the front corner of the property. The addition itself is going to meet the required setbacks, so it's only that existing garage that results in them not complying with the combined setback. They're going to move a bathroom that we believe probably was built maybe illegally, prior to her purchasing it, that goes to within 2 feet of the side property line. They're going to pull that out of the setback so that the existing house and the addition will actually exceed the 5-foot setback. I think it's going to maintain about a 7-foot setback. The home size, a review of other homes in the immediate area on similar sized and sloped lots indicates that the smallest is a 1,141 square foot, 3-bedroom, 1-bath house on a similar sized 20,000 square foot parcel. And the largest is a 2,571 square foot, 4-bedroom, 3-bath residence on a 25,000 square foot parcel. So this proposed 2,403 square foot residence is similar in size and mass to other homes in the immediate area on similar sized properties. The proposed house will reach a maximum of 20 feet in height, which is 8.5 feet below the permitted maximum height of 28.5 feet. And visually, the impact of the house as designed will be that of a single-story residence, except for a short section in the center where it will be 2 stories. The exterior facade of the addition has been articulated through the use of different sized windows, alternating horizontal and vertical siding, different siding materials, and the utilization of different directional shed roofs. So staff believes they have met the design review criteria. So we're recommending that you approve the project by adopting Resolution 1515, which contains the findings and the recommended conditions of approval. And that would conclude our report.
Okay, thank you. Now, are there any questions from the commissioners of the staff?
Question. Is there a fence here that is 6 foot tall or exceeds the limit?
There's a fence along the front of the property that's actually partially in the right-of-way that's 6 feet in height that we were unable to find a variance for, and so part of the project is they're going to pull that fence out of the right-of-way and back behind the 6-foot front setback, so it will then be conforming.
Okay.
Excuse me, through staff, how far back will they be pulling that? Is it right on the boundary, or?
It's going to be 6 feet back from the property line, but let me see how far.
While Linda's looking that up, Norma, the code reads that you need a special permit if you have a fence over 4 feet, I believe.
4 feet.
Within 6 feet, yeah. So they're going to go back to where that 6 foot is allowed, and I believe it's 6 feet back from the property line.
Is the fence currently on the property line? That was my only question.
It's actually in the right-of-way, so they've built it between the front property line and the edge of the paved road, and it will be pulled back 6 feet from the property line, which looks like it's going to be 9 feet further back from where it is now.
I see that now on the map. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
And Norma, if you could switch off your mic when you're not using it, that'd be great, because we get too many go and we get feedback. Thank you.
I have a question about these debris diversion walls and how that will work, and mainly is whether the town engineer has approved that structure.
Yes, he has. So originally they submitted without adequate mitigation measures. They got a soils report. The soils engineer made recommendations. The proposed walls weren't as long as the geotechnical engineer had recommended, so the town engineer pointed that out, and they have since lengthened them so that they now meet the requirements of their engineer, which has been approved by the town engineer. So he's looked at them thoroughly and is pleased with what's being proposed.
Okay. There was an incident when we had a major rainstorm several years ago where, rock and debris was just coming down, and we have to make sure that these walls are sufficient to ameliorate that. Okay. Any other comments?
Through the staff on. Okay. On page C2 of the plans, there is a note about the debris barrier, that it complies with the geotechnical report. Is that the most recent of the soils reports then that the engineer reviewed and approved? Okay.
Correct.
So that's on the plans. That's good.
Yes.
And then I was out at the site a while ago, so the one accessory structure, the wooden structure that's on top, that will be removed and incorporated into the new addition, right? And then the other structure on top, is that just a conforming shed less than 120 square feet?
Are we talking about the one that's kind of under construction?
The one that's Tyvek,
Yeah, that is a tree fort, and the building official and I have measured it. It's under 120 square feet. It's at the maximum height for accessory structures. We have refrained from trying to, regulate tree forts. It's not going to have any power to it. It's not going to have any water to it. And the applicant has indicated that her son is building it with a friend. So, but the other one, the other storage shed, that will be removed.
Right. I didn't have a problem with the small accessory structure. I was just checking with you. I thought
if it gets any bigger, then we will be involved, because it will require a building permit.
It's framed and roofed.
Right.
So it shouldn't get any bigger.
We would hope not.
Thank you.
I had a question about the proposed swimming pool, and we're in a drought situation.
Yeah, that's not a part of this application. At least that was our understanding, that that's something they're thinking about later on. That will come back to you if the excavation amount to create it is 100 cubic yards. You can ask the applicant if she's planning to go forward with that. She may have decided to wait because of the drought. I don't know.
Thank you.
It's not on the plans. Is it a swimming pool?
It's mentioned several places, and the swimming pool is of concern because of primarily because of the drought situation, and filling it now might not be a great idea. Okay, if there are no more commissioner comments, then are there any public comments on this property? And please come forward.
You may want to hear from the applicant first.
Oh, bring up the applicant, sorry. Applicant, come up and make any comments.
I'm sorry.
We kind of got out of order here, so the applicant's supposed to speak first.
I'm sorry.
Oh, so sorry.
No,
Okay.
it'll be just a moment. No. Okay, the applicant,
Hi, I'm Ted Arleo. I'm the architect of the project, and I'm representing Cheryl Tatum, who's the owner. I think Linda stole all my thunder. That was a really thorough explanation of the project. I don't know that I have a whole lot to add. Just to clarify the question about the swimming pool, that was something that had been proposed very early on at the time that the soils report was done. It's since been omitted from the scope of work. At the current time, the applicant has no intention of building the pool, so it's not part of this project. Some of the other issues that I wanted to talk about specifically, just in terms of the design process that we went through, I think the model clearly illustrates what's going on. It's hard to tell from the drawing sometimes how the proposed addition relates to the topography of the site. And my client is a single mother with a teenage son, and very private person, very engaged to her yard, and with growing son was eager to create a little more space for both of them. They were cramped into the existing home, which is just a 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom. You can imagine sharing a bathroom with a teenage son. And her interest and our interest, our shared interest, rather than building a second story, which would have a much more imposing presence on the street, and her interest in really being more connected to the yard led to this approach by extending the house, following the natural topography up so that the new living space really engages the yard and creates more separation from the street. So as far as the visual impact of the project to the street frontage, I think we've done a lot to mitigate that. It basically will have absolutely no presence at all in the street. Another very serious consideration that was taken during the design process before any sketching was done at all, my client made it very clear that her neighbor to the west at 180 Bothine was also a very private person. He's been there for 45 years, and we needed to be very respectful of his privacy. So with that as a starting point, we were very conscientious about trying to keep the building not only as low as possible at the west property line, but also really minimize window openings. It was made clear he did not want to feel like people were staring down into his yard from a place that he's enjoyed views looking towards the east and up the hillside there. So as you can see from the rendered elevations that are part of your package, there are very few window openings on that side that's facing 180 Bothine. In fact, the largest window are actually clear story windows, which there will never be somebody standing in front of those windows looking down. One of the other windows, the orientation, it's a corner, it's a butt glazed corner. The intent there is to extend views up the hill, not looking to the west. And then the third and final window that we're introducing on that side is a small bathroom window that's just providing light and natural ventilation for the restroom, and that's going to have translucent film on it, so they will both have privacy on either side. In addition, we've now met 3 times with the owner of 180 Bothine to the west to address some of his concerns. He reiterated concerns about privacy in windows, and we walked him through the plans. And he had some additional concerns about soil stability on his site and how the proposed work and excavation may impact his property. So he scheduled a meeting with our soils engineer to come out, and the 3 of us met with Richard, the owner of 180 Bothine, for probably close to 2 hours to make sure that all of his concerns were addressed as far as soil stability is concerned. And then the story poles went up, and he had some concerns about that, about the impact of the proposed structure for casting shadows in an area of his yard where he's got some fruit trees. And we talked about the possibility of trying to get the roof a little bit lower if possible, and I'm happy to look at that if the engineer, right now we're having kind of the preliminary structural engineering drawings done, and if the depth of roof members allow for the roof to come down a little bit, we're happy to consider that. My client has a long-standing close relationship with the neighbor. The last thing she wants to do is upset him, so we've really done our best to make sure that his concerns have been addressed. And then we also talked about figuring out a mutually agreeable landscape solution for the property line condition once the fence gets re-erected, to create some sort of climbing vines or something just to soften the boundary between the two homes. And then I don't know, were there any other questions about the debris diversion walls? It seems like maybe some of you might not have been clear about that. Any other questions that I can answer while I'm up here?
Well, I was just not quite sure. I'm not an engineer, so I wasn't quite sure how those debris walls will divert flow. So since you have a model, if you could show us, it'd be great. Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
So it's a combination of
The only thing is we kind of need to
I
get your discussion on the record.
I'm a little worried that we're going so long without the public having access to what you're saying. So thanks for showing it, but maybe you could come back and speak to the model on the record so that the public has the benefit of hearing your details. Thank you.
For those who couldn't hear what I was saying up there. So the drainage mitigation measures, there are three components to it. There are two debris diversion walls approximately 50 feet in length. One goes from the corner of the garage along the property line and extends north approximately 50 feet. The second debris diversion wall is also about 50 feet in length, and it's diagonal, and it sits approximately in the middle of the site. The third mitigating measure that's being implemented is a cast concrete channel that's to the east of the garage, and it runs out to the street. So the intent of the debris diversion walls is that if there's mud and other debris in the event of a significant slide, it will be diverted away from damaging property, not only my client's property, but also damaging the property at 196 Bothine, the property to the east.
And Mr. Chair, can I add for a moment? We have an incredible civil engineer, Ray Wazinski, that works with us, and we get into the woods on this all the time with mitigations and in fact remediation on floods that have, or slides that have occurred. And we're blessed with a very thorough civil engineer, and I'm sure that a whole slew of past applicants would gladly testify to his thoroughness out of frustration, but in the end they end up with a better project. So we get into this all the time. Rest assured that we are blessed to have a very thorough civil engineer, extremely thorough.
Yeah, and I would just like to add that the new addition isn't exacerbating this runoff issue. It's already there, and right now the water just kind of flows unobstructed out into the street, and so this really is going to be a benefit for a situation that already exists.
I want to thank you actually for these size drawings, and I really appreciate that. Also appreciate that you supplied us with a material board. I don't know if everybody can see this, but you have supplied us with a material board so it shows the colors and textures of things. And let me pass this around. And also to thank you for dealing with the neighbors and having all those meetings and trying very hard to, do you know what's going to happen with that roof height element?
We'll have a better sense when we get the preliminary engineer feedback. It's something that they're working on now. And I told the owner of 180 Bothine that, I imagine it would be inches, not feet, that we're talking about, but that we would make an effort in good faith and as good neighbors to, if there's an opportunity to bring it down a little bit, we will.
Okay, on that point, the roof height, I'm just wondering if you have any comment from staff about whether this project should be, I hate to say it, continued pending that determination.
I don't believe so, because the roof is 8.5 feet lower than the permitted height. So it's very low already, and it sounds like if there was a minor modification of inches, that's not something that would have to come back to you. Right, as long as it's going down. But it's well below what they could go to by law. So I think they've really tried.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair on that point, I was just out there in the trees. Thank you. The trees currently there are as high, if not higher, than the new roof. So I didn't see that as a concern, and I also thought it was well designed for kind of a tricky site.
Thank you. Should I leave the model up here?
Now we will call any members of the audience or public who have any comments about this project at 188 Bothine. Thank you.
Richard asked me to read this note, and it's because he has such a good relationship with his neighbor. Looking at the east side of my house, my property that has been part of me for 45 years, looking down my property line from my dining room window, which I do daily, to the northeast, what comes into view is your new Playhouse addition. I can see its window even with the new growth of the last month almost covering it up. I would appreciate it if you could leave the bay fauna that is next to and just below the buckeye tree. When the buckeye tree loses its leaves in the winter, it will leave the playhouse and its second-story window in full view of my private rooms and yard. I would also like you to leave that cover, to help hide the new addition that will extend up through that area. Looking further down the hill along the property line, the next part of your addition goes straight up to a point where it's 10 feet taller than the original house's peak. That roof line casts a shadow over the eastern side of my vegetable growing area. The architect says he'll do what he can to shorten the eaves that cut off the morning sun to help minimize the shadow. I mentioned to him that the lesser those shadows, the better to grow a vegetative screen to cover the ominous wall of the building. I suggest evergreen clematis or Cecil Brunner roses with a support system. I still have lingering concerns about the stability of the hill in and around both sides of the property line where the bay tree stumps are going to be removed. Their large root system will rot over time and possibly destabilize the ground. Drainage there is of concern. The trunks of those stumps are quite large. It looks like I have to digest these changes to my view and privacy and make these compromises to keep peace and my friendship with my good neighbor Padma, which is most important to me. And I thank you for your time and for the time the architect and soil man put in and the contractor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would we be able to get a copy of that by any chance? Did he give you a copy that you could submit to the record? Well, that would be wonderful. Then I can put it in the file and we can make sure we get it. Thank you.
Also, Mr. Chair, if I can just add for the public here, and public might be viewing live or in the future, it's always good to get us anything like this. If you can get it to staff ahead of time so we can include it in the packet, and that it can be considered both by you all prior to the meeting and the public. So these things happen where folks show up and there's last minute stuff, but I just want to encourage folks that when they have something that's valuable to add to the record, or even they think is valuable to add to the record, to get it to us if they can at all, via email or stopping by. It helps to get it ahead of time so you can consider these things. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else have any comments on this project? Okay, well, hearing none, then I'll open it to a discussion of the planning commissioners. And public comment period is now closed.
I can start. I just want to compliment the design. I really appreciate the massing and how you broke down, all the parts. I think it works very well with the site. I also think you put a lot of thought into the design, and you were very considerate of your neighbors. I do think maybe it would help if your neighbor saw the civil engineer's work, the report, the soils. Has he seen the documents? Oh, no, that's okay.
It was, I don't think he's seen the document specifically, but we had a 2-hour site meeting with the soils engineer.
He should come up? He should? Okay.
I don't believe Richard has a copy of the actual soils report. However, we had a 2-hour site meeting on his property and on my client's property to address all of his concerns.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, again for the record, the soils report is part of the packet for tonight. It's in your packet. It was posted on the town's website, as is the custom on the Friday before the meeting. So it is available online. It is available right now online at the town's website for the neighbor to have access to. I'm not sure if you heard me back there. Hello? The soils report, the engineer's soils report is available on the town's website right now. If you go to the Planning Commission meeting for tonight and the packet, and you click on this item, you can see the soils report. So you have access to it right now. You can get it on your phone right now if you want. Thank you.
And staff also spoke with him a couple of times and showed him that there's going to be drainage all along that side of the house to a dissipation basin at the front. But if you're not an engineer, sometimes that's hard to understand how that's all going to work. But he has looked at the plans.
Can I cut the chase for a moment on what I heard in the letter that was read? What stood out in my mind was the request for the one tree to be maintained, to stay, the laurel, I believe. And I asked Linda a moment ago if that was possible, and I believe it is.
Well, I would ask the applicant that. He indicated he doesn't even really want all 3 of them to stay, but he was hoping that one of the cut down bays could remain. Is there a way that could happen? Because he feels it really helps protect, give him a separation. Right.
I think that would probably be an issue for Ross Valley Fire to respond to. I think they wanted to see those come out.
Yeah, it's true because it's a bay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you replace it with a substantial sized tree that they would accept, or is it just too close?
I'd have to double check on the whatever the proximity criteria is, but just to reiterate, my client is more than happy to work with the neighbor to come up with a mutual. She wants her privacy as well,
right?
And anything that can be done to appease Richard over at 196, I think they can work closely together to come up with a landscape solution that works.
So you
for
could
both of them.
include, you could add to the resolution the condition that they work together, and that if they are unable to reach a compromise, that it would come back to you and you would make a decision on what type of vegetation screen to put in there.
It does sound, however, though, that we've got the basis for cooperation going on, and I'm happily reminded about the hazard of bay trees. They are basically like a Roman candle when they go up. They're very combustible. I didn't realize.
I was going to ask if bay trees are native to this area.
California Bay.
Okay.
Yeah. And he also is concerned, and I kind of share his concern about the tree fort, where it appears there's going to be a large window, really does face directly towards his property. So it's not really a part of this project, but I think you could include that might be part of what they would try to mediate, is that window either be relocated to face front ways, or
screening.
Do you know much about that tree fort?
Vegetation and screening.
While I'm not the architect of said tree fort, I have checked it out, and the large window that's being discussed here is actually a clear story window. So it's not, while the window itself may be visually objectionable, it's not jeopardizing the privacy.
Well, but let me just ask, there is a loft area, though. It looks like there's going to be a loft
The
area.
loft is set back from the front envelope of the building where that window is.
Okay, all right.
Okay, well, thanks for addressing that window issue, because to me, that was the big point of Richard's comment. But so that window will be sort of an obscure window, are you saying?
As I heard it, there's a loft.
It's a high clear story window. It's providing daylighting for a loft that's set back, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 feet from the front envelope of the house.
So no one can stand.
So that means no one can necessarily look out at it?
That's right.
Okay, thank you. All right, any more comments from commissioners?
No, I just wanted to say, other than the tree condition, I'm very much in agreement with this project.
Okay. If we were going to add that condition of working together for landscape screening, where exactly would that go? I was looking for the conditions of approval, so.
I would possibly make that condition number 17.
What page is that?
That would be page 6 of the resolution.
Of the resolution.
I would agree, that's a good location for it. That's the end of the town conditions and the start of the other agencies.
And just something like that, the applicant shall work with the neighbor to provide landscape screening on the west side of the house?
Right, and if they can't reach agreement on how appropriate screening will be provided, they will return before the commission to hash it out. I don't know, you come up with better language than that, but.
Okay, I think that was good language for this condition, actually. I had another comment, and that is in the letter we do have extensive engineering and soils reports here. So one of them is from LTD Engineering, April 16th. It's Exhibit C, and it mentions that the proposed sediment trap sill step will not create areas that will become mosquito breeding areas, and I wanted to ask about that. Is there some method that will be provided for?
Yes, that issue is actually raised by our town engineer, who's very, very thorough. And so I'm not recalling exactly how they're going to do that, but whatever they decided to implement satisfied Ray Rosinski, but maybe you know.
In the more recent engineer's letter of May 13th, is that, you referred to an April letter? In the May 13 letter, it states, concern was expressed that ponding areas in the drainage channel may become a problem as mosquito breeding. As noted, drain holes and drain rock are to be constructed to prevent this ponding problem. So I believe in the more recent town engineer's letter that is covered. And also I was very happy to see that the town engineer's letter recommends final construction to be checked for conformance with requirements of the geotechnical engineer, and I see that again very happily as condition number 8 of approval.
Okay. Any other comments?
Well, I believe this is a project that should be approved, and I compliment you on your thorough report and on a good design. In particular, I'd point out that from the point of view of the neighbor, there are some real advantages to this project. One that I haven't heard mentioned is that by preventing the water from going between the two buildings directly on the ground, which is currently sometimes flooding the neighbor's garage, it sounds like. But in addition to that, there's always damage that's happening to foundations by that continual erosion, and that would be stopped and stabilized by the work that's being done. So I see a number of advantages. And much as we hate to see trees cut down, I do agree that bay trees can be, they look beautiful for a while, and then you realize they're kind of a liability. You've got this giant thing that gets its roots everywhere and starts undermining things and is a fire hazard. So change is difficult, but I think these are all very well thought out, and I compliment you on the design.
Well, it seems that we may have consensus up here to approve this project with the condition that the applicant is to work with the neighbors. How was that? Yeah.
So the amendment would be that the applicant shall work with the neighbor to provide adequate landscape screening on the west property line. If an agreement can't be reached, the applicant shall come before the Planning Commission for a project modification approval on this sole aspect of the project. In other words, we don't want to reopen up the whole thing just for this one thing. So if you do have, if you can't come to agreement on this particular thing, then you will have to come back. But that's the only thing that we would be looking at, because I don't want to have to open up anything else. So.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion to approve 188 Bothine Road, application number 15-14.
I will move approval of application 15-14, request for a hill area residential development permit, design review and combined side setback variance. Should I read this whole paragraph?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, with the condition that was read into the record.
With the added condition about the landscape screening.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. And you have a 10-day appeal period, and there's a fee of $500 to file an appeal if anybody needs to do that. So anybody who's here for 188 Bothine Road, that hearing is finished now. I must say that's a very thorough presentation, and that helps a lot. Okay, moving along to item number 5, 31 Volinas Road, application number 02-39. And I'd like to have our staff report, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. If the
I have
folks in the
a
back
little
could
bit of quiet, please. Thank
Yeah,
you.
if you can take it out to the lobby, that'd be great. Hey. Okay, this one's mine. This is regarding 31 Bolinas Road. It's, they're seeking a use permit modification, design review, and a parking variance. And I'm going to walk you through a voluminous staff report, paraphrasing sections, and then we'll get to the resolution, and I caught a couple of typos, which I apologize for, and there might be a couple in the staff report. This staff report actually got finished during my vacation in Norway last week and spent much more time than I had anticipated because it is a complicated set of circumstances to try to articulate clearly and make as easily understood, because it has a history to it, it has complicated existing conditions, and hopefully a very sensible way forward on how to make this property whole again and get the owner going. And the owner is here tonight, and he's here with his representative, Mr. Fred Devine, who's an architect, and I might say a pleasure to work with. So I'm going to just move through this, and then if I miss anything, we can circle back to it. But 31 Bolinas is where the old Lydia's Kitchen used to be, on Bolinas Road between Broadway and Elsie Bank in the historic heart of town. And as I mentioned in the staff report, it's the only section of the central commercial area of town that has retail on both sides of the street. The parkade bifurcates the far side of Sir Francis Drake from Broadway, and that double-sided retail is kind of the magic formula in business world for retail. And again, it's the historic center of town. The site is right in the middle of that stretch. It's right across the street from the Mono parking lot. It, unlike any other commercial property in that little stretch, has a parking lot on one of the parcels on the west side. The staff report starts with the site map, and you'll see there's basically 4 parcels on the site map. There's 2 larger ones going towards the west, which are basically 50 by 100 feet, I believe, 50 and anyway, larger. And then the one on the corner of Mono Alley and Broadway is a smaller parcel, which actually has 25 feet of frontage on Bolinas. And then behind that northeastern parcel, or northern parcel that is, there is another smaller parcel that actually fronts Mono Lane, okay? So for the purposes of this analysis, the corner parcel fronting Bolinas and on the side to Mono Alley, that building sits sovereign on that lot. It operates independently. It could be sold independently. It has clientele that come and go over time that don't, to my knowledge, use the parking lot. So for the purposes of analysis, I did not include 29 Bolinas, okay? We added it as a parcel map because it's under ownership. All 4 parcels are under the ownership of the applicant. Now behind that corner lot, if you will, is a lot fronting Mono, okay? And we'll be coming back to that. So again, there are 4 parcels, 3 that are subject to this analysis, 2 that front Bolinas, and 1 that fronts Mono Lane, okay? So with regard to the 2 larger lots fronting Bolinas, again, the western one is the parking lot, and the eastern larger lot is where Lydia's Kitchen was. And Lydia's Kitchen did in fact use that parking lot, and she also had outdoor refrigeration behind her restaurant, and then a loading area. And prior to Lydia's, it was Wildwood Natural Foods, which used that whole center lot, if you will, the center lot fronting Bolinas, and the parking lot, and actually it was a 24-hour operation. So it was very unfortunate for the neighbors around there, because this was a real nuisance noise-wise and activity-wise. Then Lydia got in there, and it was a step in the right direction, although there was a little friction with some early morning truck delivery activity going on, because she also had some wholesale food operations going on too, I believe. So during the last two occupants of 31 Bolinas, in the back, behind the legitimate commercial space fronting Bolinas, over time there were sort of informal additions made. And we call it mission creep, where all of a sudden there's a, you've got the outdoor cooler, but then all of a sudden there's a roof over it. And then all of a sudden that roof's getting walls on it. And all of a sudden you've got sort of a building around the cooler that wasn't really permitted. So that mission creep occurred over time. And going back to that little lot fronting Mono Lane, the owner of the property has created an informal residence there because he wants to be actively involved with managing the property and maintaining it. So we started meeting with the owner of the property back, I believe, in the fall to talk about if he's going to come in with a use permit modification because he wants to bifurcate the front previous restaurant area of Lydia's into two commercial spaces. He has a tenant waiting for the north side, if you will, if you're looking at the front, the left side, and then he wants to get whole with his permit to have a restaurant come in the right-hand side, okay? So then moving back from Bolinas Road into the parcel, the design before you tonight, where there was the mission creep from the outside coolers and then a bathroom and some, I don't know exact sequence of what not, but it has gotten to where it is now. Moving back in that center area, he would like to create additional tenant space, which is would be flex space for either retail, personal service, or possibly if he finds a restaurant that would like more space, to be able to have that restaurant move into that. I should also back up and say that in the most recent use permit modification that came before the commission, they allowed outdoor seating in the front of the parking lot fronting the sidewalk on Bolinas Road. And I believe it was originally for 49 spaces, and what's shown on the plans tonight are actually, I believe, 56, but in the same footprint of what had been previously approved. So, and then lastly, so we talked about the middle space getting bifurcated, the front space getting bifurcated, the middle space with additional tenant space, it's flex space facing the middle part of the parking lot, and then behind that, what's called a common area, which is a composite of on the left side, a bathroom for the new tenant space, the part that's getting bifurcated, and then a common area with a stairway going up to an existing upstairs office area of about 549 square feet, and then new restrooms that would be ADA accessible and would be accessed through a hallway off the parking lot. Are you with me? So that's the front, bifurcating the front, cleaning up the middle, part with retail or flex space facing the lot, parking lot, and then behind that, this common area, which is not technically rentable commercial area. And then lastly, all the way back in the site on the middle lot containing 31 Bolinas, additional tenant space, which is actually bifurcated by a hallway going back to what would be formalized live-work space on the lot fronting Mono Lane. Okay? So let me move on here. So when you add up those changes, what I spoke to first in terms of the front and the middle, that's totaling 2,897 square feet when it's done. Much of that is there, either formally existing or informal. And then all the way in the back, we're talking about creating 830 square feet in the very back of the 31 Bolinas lot with the hallway and the common area, and then going towards Mono Lane, the live workspace. Are you with me? Okay, so there's sort of four sections, if you will, to this project, not counting the upstairs office, which is there existing.
Question through the chair, please, if I may. All of those spaces, though, exist within the footprint of the existing structures, right?
With not all of, well, when you say footprint, within the existing roofs.
Okay, within the exterior footprint
Yes,
of the
the
buildings.
roof, of the roof.
Got it, thank you.
The actual informal live workspace on the mono lane lot, shall we say, has no walls. It has a roof, but it only has walls on one side. Okay? So when you say footprint, and if you, roof print, let's just say.
So if I understand correctly, the corner in the back next to the parking lot in the existing building is kind of cut in and has kind of grown out as a kind of a shed that's gotten to be less of a shed. That corner will now become part of the building.
Correct,
As part of the thing.
correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was a bit of a Rubik's Cube to deal with the traffic impact requirement, which stipulates that if a project is going to increase the trips to the site by 100 over the previous use, that it requires a traffic impact permit, a study resulting hopefully in a permit, or if a project's over 5,000 square feet. So this, depending on how you measure it, is or isn't over it. So how I measured it was not counting the live workspace as anything other than live workspace, and therefore it's below the 5,000 foot threshold, okay? Likewise, for the parking requirement, we're not dealing with 29 Bolinas, which is sovereign and operating quite well by itself. We're not dealing with, as far as the parking lot and the parking of the commercial spaces, we're not dealing with the live workspace, and I didn't count the hall, and I didn't count the common area. So when you add up the aggregate of the front two bifurcated space, the new middle space, and the back space, you're actually parking the site at the required one space per 200 square feet. It comes in at about, they're providing 19 spaces and the requirement's 18.66 or something. So it actually meets it. So another wrinkle was that you have a parking lot that doesn't quite meet the existing code, but is what we call in our world legal nonconforming. So rather than put the onerous requirement on the applicant to have to deal with a substandard lot in existence that's been functioning for years, we fortunately relied on the past findings of you all, the commission that did the most recent use permit modification for the outdoor seating, at which time the parking lot was deemed existing nonconforming, and we went forward with that assumption for a couple reasons. One is I think they can jiggle the parking spaces and make some more small spaces and get the aisle width up to 23.5, so it's almost 24. And lastly, the trucks have been coming and going there and there for a long time, and we think the truck delivery would be before most of the parking spaces are filled anyway. There's a lot of loading of trucks that is going on over in the mono alley next to the mono parking lot. The truck drivers that deliver are pretty up to speed. So we didn't want to put the onerous requirement on the applicant at this point to go through all this rigmarole when the parking lot's there. It's technically legal non-conforming. We think it behooves them in the future to think it through. We've only stipulated that they should stripe it. And we verified that for the commercial space, it actually, and that's counting the office upstairs too, it actually parks itself. Except, again, I didn't count the live workspace, because not only does the live workspace throw this project into the need of a traffic impact permit, which is a very onerous and costly requirement, requires council approval ahead of time on the methodology, and even after you all approve the project, if you were to, has to go back to council, and time is of the essence in this, getting this applicant whole and able to get people in there. So I took the tact of saying, not only should this be, the live workspace at this point in time be restricted to just live workspace to make his informal situation whole and legitimate, but that's the only piece that's not being properly parked. Now, we're comfortable with you all issuing a variance on allowing that unit to live workspace to continue to exist without the parking requirement, and that would require the variance, which is articulated and outlined in the resolution. And the only wrinkle there is that there, in the past, there was a gate along Mono Lane, and there's even the hardscape driveway going in there. So you could either, again, sort of encourage the applicant in the future to consider, you know, parking the live workspace. You could make it a condition, or you could grant the variance. And I think starting with the variance, again, to make the applicant whole, I think down the line it might be motivation for the applicant to consider, you know, adding the parking, depending on who eventually lives in that live workspace, which may or may not be the owner going forward. Once he gets this building back up to speed, fully rented, he's going to be in a lot better situation to decide what he wants to do with other parts of his life. So that's the other wrinkle with the parking, and that's why the only variance is being requested for the live workspace. So just to back up and reiterate this to make sure it's understood, we don't think it's a bad idea of having the live workspace, flexible space in the future. It's just that because of the code, it triggers the very onerous requirement of the parking study. So at this point, we're saying it needs to be restricted to purely live work. However, it's written in the conditions that should he decide that he wants to finally rent the live workspace for something other than live work, say light industrial, personal services, or retail, then he is going to have to come in to us ahead of time and go through the process of analyzing the impacts to the town by just going over that threshold. Having said that, the way that that can be done per a certain section of the code is administratively. He can actually come in and work with us without having to go through the whole process to just focus on that piece of it. So that's a little bit easier glide path when you get to that point also. So let's see here. We talked about traffic impact permit requirements. We talked about parking. The discretionary permits required are the use permit modification. We believe that this mixed-use approach with these smaller incremental spaces is much more appropriate for the neighborhood and gives the applicant more flexibility moving forward. And we're trying to create a situation where he doesn't have to come back into us every time that he's changing a tenant for a use permit modification. So this allows him more flexible use of the space. If one client comes in and doesn't want it all, he can rent to them for smaller space. If one client comes in and wants it all, he can rent to them without having to come back and go through this whole process again. So again, the discretionary permits required are the use permit, the parking variance I went over, design review, which we articulated how we believe the findings are met. One little wrinkle with the design review are the 3 containers that are technically considered structures in the code and therefore require permits. Fortunately, he's planning on taking the 2 containers way back behind 31 Bolinas between the building and the fence out. However, the 1 container in the yard fronting Mono Lane in that other lot, he would like to keep, and we don't have a position on it. The only wrinkle there is if you get into the woods on opening that up for parking, then it might make the space more available for parking. There used to be parking back there, by the way, too, but we think going forward, we'd like to help this applicant get whole as soon as possible and make it as easy to get back up and going. As far as site disturbance, there's no problem. Setbacks, he meets it. You might recall that the code reads that on commercial property there are no setback requirements unless you're next to a residential area, in which case you have to meet the residential setback requirement, which in this case is 6 feet, and he's well beyond the 6 feet. If I could turn your attention, and lastly, he is not only in the flood zone, per the new FEMA regulations, he is in the floodway. And the new FEMA regulations are quite onerous, as so many other parts of our life and planning have become. So we, unfortunately and fortunately, had to request what's called a no-rise certificate, and we're blessed in town to have a very skilled hydrologist, engineer type, James Riley, who issued the no-rise certificate, verified the flood height relative to the outside seating, and made his recommendations that were attached. And basically, the outside seating that had been previously approved, now that it hadn't been built and is coming back in, it stipulated that the lattice connection between the posts will have to rise to 1 feet so that it doesn't impede the flow of the floodway, which will be going around the building, okay? And fortunately, the informal improvement of live work is out of, it's behind the floodway, right? So it's in the lee of the flood travel. But the posts themselves, this is how detailed these studies get, the posts themselves of the outdoor seating area do inhibit water. So to make up for the inhibiting factor of those posts in the outdoor seating, Mr. Riley recommended that 6 feet of the fence between the parking lot and the property to the west be removed so that that makes up for the flood flow. So we're good with all that. It was another hoop that the applicant had to jump through, and we thank him for doing that. And then lastly, if I could turn your attention to the resolution. I apologize for some simple typos in the staff report, and I apologize for a couple typos in the resolution, two of which I'd like to just point out to you that I think are the only substantive ones I've found. In the title to the resolution on line 3, where it says at 31 Bolinas Road 2A allowed, A is an error. Then moving down to the third whereas, on the second line, a written statement provided by the other tenant of the building, that should be redacted. That's a tag left over from another resolution, unfortunately. And aside from that, I haven't caught all the other typos, and there may be some other ones in here. So with that,
6B.
6, okay, well, we can get through.
It's not trip, I think you meant tip there as well.
Yeah, so and again, again, I was on vacation in Norway, and this one needed to get finished. We wanted to get them on the agenda tonight, so I worked long and hard on this, and by the time I hit the send button, I just didn't have the energy or the luxury of time to go back over it, so I apologize. As you know, we run a well-oiled machine, and we're always pumping out the product. So with that, is there any questions?
I have a question. If the gate from Mono Lane onto the site were reintroduced, I'm considering making that a condition, that gate be reintroduced.
I think it's actually, you can, when the applicant's representative or he speaks, you can ask him. I think the actual gate still exists, but it might be only 10 feet per the drawings. And there might be some lovely bamboo that would have to be removed. So you can get into that when you talk with him. Oh, can I mention one other thing? As you might recall, just for everybody's education, this is in the central commercial zone, and second floor residential is allowed by right in the second floor, whereas ground floor requires a use permit. We've spoken with his architect, who's spoken with the applicant, and he actually has someone who's quite interested in renting possibly the upstairs as a unit. And they did not want to slow down this application by going back to the drawing board on this piece of it. And it's equally important that we don't slow it down at this point, because we've just heard from fire review when we kicked around the idea that it's a tricky situation on the second floor on this particular building, because no wall on the little office space upstairs is flush to the side of the building. In the new fire code, it's very onerous now, and it's going to cost a pretty nickel to actually make that upstairs a live-work space. You're going to have some way to not walk across the roof to get out of the second floor, so they can deal with that subsequent to tonight's activity.
Through the chair, I have a couple of questions. In terms of the second story office space that in the future could be live work, that does not currently exist, or it does?
It exists as office.
It is an office, and it will remain office.
Yes.
And doesn't get
there's no intervention
remodeled.
That's right.
Now the one-story live workspace at the back corner of Mono, what is this 8 by 20 container that remains? If it's a dark line, it remains. If it's a broken line, like along the back of the new tenant spaces, those get removed, is that correct?
Yes, the very back,
Okay, and what are those 8 by 20 containers?
I'll let him speak to it and explain what he
Okay,
uses it for.
and then, let me just ask.
And again, only one's being asked to remain, only the one on the mono yard.
Yes, that's correct. If we could then require this evening that with approval of this, they provide the parking space to the live workspace?
You could, and then you would be relaxing the need for a variance. You would not need to issue a parking variance, and you could leave it to staff to work out the geometrics.
Correct, but you're saying that the owner would have to remove that container?
I'm
and
not
then-
sure, I'm not 100% sure he would have to. I'm not sure.
Okay.
You could condition it that if it's necessary to provide the parking, that it'd have to be removed.
Okay, and then a final question. Now, a couple of final questions. The restaurant that is adjacent to the outdoor seating, they obviously will have their own restroom facilities as required by code
Correct.
to be ADA accessible. It's the other 3 spaces that will have the joint new restroom facilities.
No, it's actually, that's for the restaurant as well.
Oh, that is for the
common
front
area, and that's why that
restaurant as
hallway,
well.
yeah, the hallway between the middle space and the very back space, which is accessed off the walkway along the parking lot, that is the shared new restroom facility for the patrons of all the commercial space.
Of all of the
With the exception,
spaces,
with the
okay.
exception of the tenant space that towards Broadway that will actually have its own bathroom.
The new live workspace.
No, I'm sorry. Fronting Bolinas, there's actually one more bathroom. If you look in the common area, to the left of the common area, there's a bathroom right off of that tenant space.
Oh, yes, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and there is a tenant anxiously waiting to get into that space, actually.
Okay, and then my final question is this more or less parking spaces that were in fact available and being used previously?
Yes.
Is it more or less?
I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. I think it's a little slightly more efficient. They've squeezed in the required 19 to meet the threshold as I explained it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Well, you basically asked the questions I had, so that's good. Any other questions? Yeah, we will after we're done asking staff.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. What is to the south of the parking lot? Is that a retail or is it a house?
It's a house. It's a house that's set way back from the street with a driveway apron in front of it.
Okay. Have they been notified
Oh, yeah.
of this patio? Okay.
Oh, yeah, that patio, or the outside seating, again, was heard by the commission, September 2012, I believe. Yes.
Okay. And then my second question is on the response letter to the comments. The reason for not removing the remaining storage is because it is attached to a concrete slab and can't be removed easily. How is it attached? Is it bolted?
Again, I believe the applicant can speak to that, but I think there was I'm not sure if it's an independent slab or part of the old driveway. I believe it's an independent slab. It was created for the container so that it could sit, and so there's some value to having something that's sort of so substantial.
Okay. Okay, I can ask. Thanks.
Just wanted to clarify that the outside seating area that was previously approved, this is the same footprint? Because I do remember there was all kinds of conversation around how many and what it looked like.
Yes, it's the same footprint. They bumped it up from 49 seats to, I believe, 56. from just a little bit more efficient layout. And whereas the previous approval was for a raised deck, which stipulated a outdoor lift for ADA, by going down the ground level, then the part of the footprint which was the lift got eliminated, and then the jiggling of the seating, they were able to bump up the seating a little bit. And by the way, as the resolution articulates, we feel that outside seating is, more in keeping with the tenets of the general plan now. It's creating a more pedestrian-friendly environment and what have you.
My other question was, with the removal of the 2 containers in the back, was there a possibility of moving? I noticed that the trash area is kind of out in the front of the driveway. Was there a consideration of moving that trash area back to where those containers and grabbing another parking space? To which my other question is, if another parking space could be added into that parking lot, would it suffice to be the parking space that's needed for the resident?
That's exactly the getting into the woods on that parking lot we found very onerous. First of all, it's very difficult without doing a complete parking study with a learned, skilled designer to jiggle things, and I'm not sure you're going to get anything more out of it. I could not see a way to gain a parking space from moving the trash, because that drive aisle is just where you're at right now. Likewise, if you're putting the trash back against that back fence, you're actually closer to a residence. And then you've also got a deeper in drive with the trash trucks. So it was sort of a lesser of all evils.
Okay, my comment is, and reflects other comments, is I would like to see that parking space, and I see it's taking out bamboo, and it doesn't seem like it requires taking out the container, but let's get in with the applicant.
Questions, yeah.
Could I ask a question also? Along the back, the side opposite Bolinas Road, all the way toward the back, as I was looking at it, so these containers have not been moved yet. So all the containers that are there now. So along that back, you can't see very well because there's gates at both ends, both on the mono side and on the parking lot side, but peering in a crack between the gates, you can see that there's actually little stepping stones, and it looks kind of nice back there, like a little walkway. So am I understanding correctly that when those containers are removed, that there would actually be more space back there, or would the containers be replaced with additional?
It's our understanding, and you can ask the applicant or his representative. It's our understanding. It's labeled. It's actually labeled on the plans as like tenant outdoor space. The fences are called to stay, and in fact, on the informal living side fronting Mono Lane, there's actually a beautiful little vegetable garden, I think, that Lydia put in that the owner maintains and enjoys also.
Around the other
which
side
I'm hoping that if you did go
yeah.
the parking direction, he can have his garden and his parking space too. So, but he can speak to that.
Okay.
Or his representative.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, if there are no more questions of staff, then I'd like to call upon the applicant to make a presentation. Thank you.
I'm Fred Devine. I'm the architect. And I'm also a resident of Fairfax, and I've been here a long time. I used to sit up there many, many years ago. And so this site means a lot to me, separate from working on it. I want to thank Jim for a really good staff report. Also thank him because this one was complicated for my client, Brad. He bought it from Wildwood Foods, and I think he probably thought it was a great investment property that was ready to go and maybe didn't require lots of work. And it's been hard. These last few years have been hard because Lydia's went out, the restaurant that bought it and was going to start, got partway into it and wasn't able to keep going. There were many ideas about what could be done. And when Brad came to us, we went to Jim. Jim even created a list of, well, we need to back up and see where did this all come from. The good news is about all those additions that sort of showed up, there's a really good permit record for them. They are canopies and walls and refrigerated units and this and that, but there really were permits for it. But it was a use that long term was difficult for downtown Fairfax because it's industrial and it was noisy. So we worked on this for a while, and in concert with Jim and Linda, and came up with the idea that, well, maybe if we stuck with the footprint, and the footprint is the roof print, because that back area isn't enclosed right at the back corner, the live workspace. But it's been effectively used as space since Wildwood Foods. And then the next challenge was coming up with spaces that would work for retailers that would be in Fairfax, because the space was too deep. The lot's 125 feet deep. It's way too deep for anybody to use, and that's the way it was. So then the challenge was, well, how do you make use of that back space? So what you'll see is happening right now is one of the doorways in the plan that you have before you is going back in. There was a door in the front. It came out for the previous restaurant. It's going back in so that there'll be two spaces. However, the good idea the restaurant had of creating the side walkway, which as you're facing it would be between the parking lot and the building, and the entry that sits between the patio is a way to draw people into the site. And of course the parking lot should do that in the future once this is redeveloped. All of this is ADA compliant, so there's a walkway going back and then windows being added such that we're not really changing the look of the building much. Brad liked the way it was, so we figure it's sort of it's an is, but if we can put windows on their doors, and the major part of what's going on here is reconstruction. I think it may suggest that the back is being torn down. It's not. It's being completely re-roofed, seismically upgraded. The entire building seismically upgraded. Pretty much all new wiring and plumbing, new sewer line, fire sprinklers throughout the whole building, so that it will be a totally up-to-date building when it gets done. And then when you come back and you approach these spaces, they're real commercial spaces. There are common restrooms. I should add that if somebody wanted to have their own restroom, the way the sewer line is designed for this, each one of those spaces could have their own, but to keep the cost of the space down, we're not building separate bathrooms in each one where they're not required. So that's how it kind of became what you see, and I think there's some interest in some of the spaces right now. The live work and the way Jim approached it with regards to the parking is pretty new to us since the staff report, because the client would like not to have to open that gate. The gate is there. He keeps it closed because there was security problems with people from the bar cutting through the property, and all kinds of things were happening, and so he keeps that closed off. What's in the back that is currently on the other side where the containers aren't is a really nice organic garden that he would hope would stay there. And then the next space, you'll see there's a door in the plan for that space, would be used for someone to maybe do the same thing outside of their whatever their business happened to be. That would be just an outdoor space to sit, something like that. Maybe add some extra planting that worked for their particular use. We do not picture it as where a door company would be stacking old doors or anything like that. It would, and I think we could even condition that it's not going to become a junkyard or a corp yard of some kind. But I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm trying to answer questions along the way. Those two containers are going away because they really constricted that space. He'd like to keep the other one. It's used for storage. That's what it is. It's a container that has storage in it. But everything else is being completely redone. I should point out, we missed the fact there's a comment on the lighting. There's actually shielded lights out there now. They're kind of a mishmash, but we would change the lighting and staff could approve it. It happens to be a wall pack that sticks out. It should have shined down. And the windows, it asked that, well, if we're using double hung windows, some of them show grills, some of them don't. The comments on the ones that were put in by the previous restaurant that didn't get off the ground are grilled. They're brand new. We were going to, and if you look at the elevations, you'll see them. They're on the back. We were just going to move them and use the same window type, but without the grids, because the comments from various prospective tenants was they didn't really want the grids dividing up the view of the space. So the intent is they're all the same type. It's just the back ones that face the residential. It seemed like it was okay. If you thought that didn't work, we just have to get windows that didn't have grids. And I think that's the main thing is also that what this is an opportunity to do, and Jim's alluded to it, is this is a kind of like an empty spot in the middle. If you walk downtown like I do in that block, and it's really going to be one that I think will draw people in. Unlike so much, it's probably perfect, but I can count the times I've walked in the little bitty narrow space right across the street where there are shops going back. It's a little too narrow, and this would be more inviting, and maybe a lot of more pedestrian activity would start to happen. And I think he's even hearing from people that are interested perhaps in that back spot. Okay. So he's saying there's a couple of people that are already around that are asking about spaces here. We specifically left out the idea about the residential with the second floor, and there are some complications. We just didn't want to throw this off so that the project could get started, and then we can come back with ideas like that, because that was a great idea. So otherwise, I'm available to answer any of the questions you might have. Hopefully I hit all the questions that came up, but I might have missed one. None?
Well, I like the look of it, and I'm glad to see this moving along because, as you say, it's been sort of sitting there in a state of either vacancy or construction or both for a while now. I appreciate the re-addition of a door on the front because that was kind of missing all the way along that part of town, consistent with what Jim has educated me might be called the return to the old urbanism. The shop fronts face the sidewalk and are close up to the sidewalk, and they are inviting to pedestrians by having a door there. And so the fact that that door was removed, it's been pointed out to me by citizens in town who, suggested that that's odd that that door wasn't there anymore. So I'm glad you're putting that back in. And I'm glad to see that you intend to leave a space between the building and the outdoor seating area, again, to invite pedestrians to walk back into the parking lot, accessing the other parts of the building back there, rather than making it something where a pedestrian would have to walk around and follow the path that's really intended for cars to follow. It creates a real pedestrian access. So I appreciate those things. With regard to the lighting along the front, I just had a comment on there, which I'm not proposing that we add as a condition because I think it's a little picayune, but I'd love to see solid state lighting along there, LED lighting along there. The town is in the process of putting LED lighting all along the street lights there. The ones on the corner are already done, the Bolinas and Broadway corner. And the ones going down the street in front of this building are not yet converted to LED, but I think they probably will be as soon as we find some funding to do it. So something that's consistent with that would look nice, I think, along there. But I'm not proposing that as a formal condition, just a suggestion. So,
Mr. Chair, can I just make a couple comments before you all continue, perhaps, to respond to Mr. Devine on a couple points? One of the challenges with this whole thing was the history of permits, and Mr. Devine alluded to the fact that every step had permits. I'm glad you think that, because in the record it was a little hard for us to actually track what had happened when, particularly prior to the current owner. So we had a challenge, and the beauty of getting this thing whole now is sort of making everything right, whether it was permitted along the way or not. And that's something that just would be a wonderful thing to accomplish. With regards to the doors, I really regret when the tenant who was going to use all that front space for the restaurant and his very skilled architect, Mr. Morgan Hall, came in and talked about the gateway between the outside seating and bringing them back that way. And that gateway really sort of became the door to the property, if you will. I really regret not really being more adamant in the staff report that the original Lydia door stayed. So we are gaining back one door for sort of, as you look at the property from the street, the left side. But I just want to point out the restaurant door is still that philosophy of, you know, being part of the walkway going back in, which I think has more symmetry now that that walkway is becoming the entry to the other two spaces going back. And then lastly, with regards to Mr. Devine's response about the parking off of Mono Lane, again, I'm sorry to throw these things out there at the last minute, but I had a Pandora's box here to deal with. I agree. And our recommendation, I just want to reiterate, is to grant the parking variance for the live workspace. I kind of have the same tendency to feel like you were feeling. It's an opportunity, but I have to say, just the security issue alone that you just articulated, that's what's so good about the public process here, is to hear people's points of view. And I might add that, our general plan is both the land use element, and the existing and soon to hopefully be adopted housing element update call for managing parking, and we do have in the near future as a town center element chapter of the general plan calls for, we will be holding a series of workshops towards creating a town center plan, and a big piece of that effort will be trying to look at managing the parking in the downtown area and taking a managed parking approach, because in fairness to the applicant, again, none of these other properties by and large provide parking, and none of the upstairs second units that exist in the downtown provide parking. So we have to deal with the parking for second floor or first floor residential, I believe, going forward in a comprehensive manner. So that's why I fell on the side of recommending the variance for the live work space at this point.
Oh, okay, thank you, Jim. I think that I had a different take on it from the report.
An opportunity that was important to flesh out, and I think we have.
Right, and let me clarify with the owner, is the container that's planned to be remaining there is behind bamboo, so it can't really be seen walking down Mono Lane, is that correct?
You can't see over that fence at all, sorry.
Okay, very good. I had two questions. Is one, has there been any consideration of one of those 19 parking spaces being electric, for an electric car, having
charging station?
Charging station.
It didn't come up because, quite frankly, we're now at the point that this property provides more parking than anybody else. Nobody else has it. I don't even think Fairfax Square, I meant to go check, I don't think they're even close to what this is. But when you're trying to come in with an application, you need every one of those spaces. Now, if it's not going to count against the owner that one of them's designated, I would leave that to Brad or your thoughts, because that is what's happening, but I'm not sure how does that affect your count. Does that subtract?
Yeah, it does. It gets us in a little bit of harm's way on the count.
I wasn't planning on having that be some kind of condition. I just want asking if there were
I'd say
thoughts in that direction.
we hopefully will be increasing our facilities in the public lots, and we do have the public lot across the street. We put 2 in the parkade now. The Good Earth did have the luxury of enough parking where they could put 2 in also, and we have 1 behind Town Hall. So the town will continue to hopefully upgrade its infrastructure opportunities for electric charging.
I think that's a good idea to consider that. If the applicant were not to prohibit non-electric cars from parking there, but just have them be open parking, but just with chargers available,
that would work.
That would not subtract from the count.
That would work.
And then maybe in the future, as time moves on, we might end up amending the way we do our counts so that it doesn't subtract, because that doesn't seem like, that seems like the way things are moving.
I might add that with, some of the Priuses now, you don't even need a charging station, you just need a plug.
Well, yeah, but as we move toward all electrics, they'll need a charging station, and so that's 220-volt wiring, and so if that's something that could be done just along that wall to at least make sure the wiring is there, so that a charger placed at the stripe between 2 spaces, a dual charger could be put there, then you'd have 2 spaces that were open to electric with just by remembering to put that wiring in before you lock up the walls. Be a good idea.
Can you hear okay, Fred? Can you hear what he's saying? I'm sorry, Brad, you're gonna have to wait to come up here. Brad, anytime, Fred and I both have a hearing deficit, so anytime you can't hear what a commissioner's saying, Fred, let us know. Yeah, great, got it. Got it. And
Whoops, I'm sorry, I didn't push this button.
And Fred, what I heard him say also was not in a dedicated parking space, so we don't eliminate 1 parking space, right, but just a flex space that would have a charger available if someone came in and was there.
I'm not sure what a charger costs. You need to come up here.
If I could address that, I would love to have electric parking there. I'm all for that. It's going to be quite a cost prohibitive thing for me at this point, because the amount of electricity that I have coming to the property, if I go over any more than what is proposed for being there, and which I would have to do to accommodate for electric thing, I have to put in a new a whole new system back line, and it would be quite expensive. And so I would hope we wouldn't have to go down that road. I would love to have all electric there, but like I said, it would be pretty cost prohibitive to me at this point.
Okay, my only thought about it was, since you're redoing a lot of electric, apparently modernizing the electric, I just had this thought, let's bring that in, but it's only for consideration. It's not intended to be a condition or anything. It's
great. Yeah, I would, like I said, if I could make all the parking spaces electric, I would. I mean, it would makes perfect sense.
It's not that often we get a parking lot up here to talk about.
That's true. That's true. All right, thank you.
So would the it was mentioned actually, would the owner be amenable to a condition that these garden areas that are basically behind the bamboo remain as they are and be kept free of debris? A condition like that, would that work?
I think you already offered that up.
Well, I have a question though. I was wondering if it was considered, or if you considered putting an automatic door. You were talking about maybe foot traffic coming in back here from the bars or the restaurants, and that's the reason you don't want to get rid of the gate, correct?
Well, the reason the gate got built, which was before this application was even happening, was that there was a real problem with people coming through, and just all kinds of things going on after hours from the bar, cutting through, because it sort of was a known thing. So Brad built the fence to, the gate was there. The gate's still there, but he keeps it closed. It can be opened, but he can open it, and if he needed to take a delivery or something like that, he could do that. Mono is also, when we were looking at earlier other schemes, many of which we talked about, it's very difficult to make parking work because Mono is so narrow, and you need a 26-foot backup to get complying parking. And I don't, it's not even 20, it's really narrow. And we found that we needed to use so much of the depth that by the time you can open the gate and go in, but it's not, what do I want to say? You can do it, but if you ask the town engineer to say this meets the proper layout for how the parking works, the answer would be no.
So,
you've got to do it this way.
So it's not, the monolane is not accessible for a car to come in and park in this space, is that?
Not according to the way the code works for a regular parking lot. There's not enough turning radius unless you took the whole fence out and that gave you enough radius, and then you went very deep into the site. You've got to get at least 26 feet of backup plus your 19-foot parking space, so you need 45 feet. And now, can you do it? Yes, and people do it, but they don't count as legitimate parking spaces. They're just informal spaces that we all use. We may do them at our house and other places that we figure, and especially if you have a really small car right now, you can maybe do it. But a formal parking really did have to come in almost all the way to where the building line is, I think. In fact, I can look at this real quick. Yeah, Mono is only 15 feet wide. It's not even the normal 20-foot alley. So it's 15 feet, and you would need to pull all the way into the building at the far side to make it be really accessible and have it wide enough that you had the turning radius.
Right, yeah, you have to use a lot of that space both on the private side for the backing up and the turning radius so that you have a huge opening. By the way, when we get to it, Linda found a place in the resolution where it's very easy to tweak it slightly for the outside storage issue.
Okay, and the security issue actually did it for me. I think that gate has to remain closed for that reason as well. So the only condition I would propose here is that the garden, as you mentioned, the garden areas would remain debris free and be kept as best garden areas as they can.
And we're talking about the rear of 31 Bolinas.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and the I'd like to see rutabagas planted there.
I was just wondering, is I noticed that some of the parking spaces in the parking lot are 8 by 16, some are 10 by 19, and some are 9 by 19. Is that all prescribed based on you have to have so many of this size and so many of that size?
No, and again, we did not get into the woods on the disposition of the parking lot. That gets into an onerous requirement and geometrics, and we figured it's legal nonconforming. It behooves the applicant to make it as usable as possible. I mean, I brainstormed on if you made all the ones against the wall of the building small, then all of a sudden you've got 23.5 the whole way back. But I didn't want to slow this down. It's technically legal nonconforming. That's how we treated it back in September 2012. And we were trying to make this exercise as least onerous as possible, given the challenges all across the board on this.
No, that's fine. I was just, if in striping it, you can put more in there, it might give you down the road, depending on what else you might use, but I'm not going to hold anything up. I was just...
Yeah, and at this point, it's really the depth, I think, that has the wiggle room to create more drive aisle. I think they've done a pretty good job, which is a real challenge to maximize the parking.
And I could just add something to that. That is exactly why they're not 9 by 19, which is the standard. 8 by 16, I'm not sure whether Fairfax has that standard, but that's a San Rafael standard for a compact. And 9 by 19 is, of course, standard for everybody. The reason they're wider is because the drive aisle, it's an older parking lot. It's narrow. Well, if you make the space a little wider, and yes, if we could have gotten to 10 feet on all of them, it'd be great. You can make that turning radius. It's kind of like the discussion we were just having about Mono, only here it works a little better. So we tried to make it as good as we could. It'll make it easier to get into. And that's why they're a little bigger than required. Thank you.
I want to just say, I think this is a serious upgrade for downtown Fairfax, and I congratulate you. I mean, this is a beautiful, hopefully it'll look like this thing. And putting that door back in, yeah, I mean, you could walk down that building, and where do you go in? You know, it's very good. I think the improvement is amazing. We also want to encourage, if we can, live workspace. So then, okay.
I was also, you had mentioned the lighting before, and I do remember that in a previous permit with the house on the other side of the parking lot I don't know if we need to make it a condition of downward lighting along that west side so that there aren't any lights shining out into the parking lot into the residence across the other side of the parking lot. I remember that being a discussion at a previous...
It's in there.
Oh, it's in
already
there.
in
Okay.
there. Yep.
Through the chair. Just a couple comments. One on this trash area. I don't see a sketch at all of what that's going to look like. Can you tell me anything about that? And can we condition that area to be absolutely clean at all times? That can be a real problem with this type of enclosure right at the parking lot and at the main entrance to the building. I'm just concerned that it's secured so that the whole neighborhood doesn't come and dump garbage there, and that it gets cleaned up so that there isn't that foul-smelling crap that falls to the ground in almost every trash area that I have seen in my life. I would very much appreciate some sort of a condition if the owner thinks that's acceptable.
It does show on the plans swinging doors, so maybe the easiest way to address this is just to say that, you know, a screen fence type structure around it with the swinging doors that have a latch.
I'm good with that as long as the ground is cleaned.
Yeah,
and
right.
that's a debris box, I'm assuming you'll pop right in there.
Right.
Well, there's actually a detail in the drawings. Yeah, it's right on sheet A1 in the lower corner, 2A1.
Thank you.
There's
There
a
you go.
detail of the
There
trash
you go,
enclosure.
There it is.
And yes, it's got a closure. It doesn't show a latch. You could add that. And I'll just tell you that the problem of other people using these is a constant challenge for...
Sure. All the more reason to make an effort to keep it clean. I was going to try to push for parking at the live work, but I do understand the difficulties of making that work. And then my final comment is a question of whether the signage and the lighting for the restaurant fronting Bolinas comes back to this body for review, or is that a staff approval?
The signage will.
Okay.
Can I clarify that? The sign ordinance has signs that comply, and if they comply with the sign ordinance, they can be processed by staff. But if there's anything unusual that doesn't comply with the sign ordinance, it would have to come back to you.
Thank you.
And also, by the way, in terms of cleanliness, there is an overriding condition in the resolution. It's actually number 1 under the first whereas. The applicant shall maintain, pardon me for a second. On the 4th page, under the whereas, number 1, the applicant shall maintain the premises in a neat and attractive manner at all times. Such maintenance shall include, but not be limited to, exterior building materials, signage, windows, the planters, the ground, and the pavement surfaces.
Perfect.
Maybe we could add the trash.
The trash enclosure.
Add specifically trash enclosure, please.
I'm wondering where the nearest hose bib is. I wouldn't be able to tell from this drawing, but it appears that there is no water running to that trash enclosure. Okay, so then it will be taken care of.
And I believe there is a spigot along the wall of the building that will
Great.
maintain, and then you can just drag the hose across.
Okay. That would be great.
And
Yeah.
the way I
Speak.
By the way, in all my leases, there's a $1,000 a year maintenance charge if the tenants don't keep the place clean, and I have to have somebody come and clean it. So there's a real incentive for each of them to do that. So I want the place to look nice too, of course.
That's good to hear, because you're increasing the number of tenants, and I have some concern that one debris box would be sufficient once you're fully leased up there.
Right. If it's not, there's options to have the trucks come more than once a week.
That's right. That's a good option. But generally, I'm delighted to see this redesign and staff's accommodation of this property to bring it into compliance as much as possible and make it economically sustainable for the owner. So I'm very happy to see it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Besides, I think the trash area smell would be self-maintained. It's so close to the outside dining area.
And we did add that.
You would hear from your patrons if that became a problem, probably.
And by the way, we did add the trash container area to number 1 under the whereas. And then Linda had a place where she might beef up the.
No, it's not beefing it up. It's words that we left out. So condition number 7 is supposed to read, there shall be no storage of any materials, supplies for the mixed-use development outside the buildings, nor long-term storage for any vehicles, et cetera, et cetera.
Outside the buildings should be in there.
Okay, excellent. Then we will close the applicant's statements and open the hearing for public comments, if any. Not hearing any, we will close the public comment period. And any other comments from the commissioners?
No.
Okay. May I just propose one condition, that the garden areas shall remain and be kept free of debris, and that would be perhaps condition F.
And at the rear of the 31 Bolinas.
At the rear of 31 Bolinas, let's add that. And with that, I would call for a motion.
I will move approval of application 02-39, expansion, reconstruction of commercial building, use permit modification, design review, and parking variance.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, congratulations. Go for it. I must remind you that there's a 10-day appeal period, and the fee is $500 if you so choose to appeal to the town clerk.
Yeah, well, I can see his point that it's just an inefficient use of space. To have one car parked there, you want a whole bunch of other space that's got nothing can ever be put there, and you can't put a garden there. It's just.
Okay, so now I believe we're going to go to approvals and corrections of the minutes. And I might start out by saying I think these minutes were very well prepared, and thank you.
I would agree. However, I think we may be in another condition where we currently, because Commissioner Caroline recused herself for the last 2 and is no longer here, we only have 3 commissioners here to approve it.
You can informally approve it.
So we can informally approve it, or like we did that one time. She'll be back next time. We could just.
I think when you're able to approve it, you need to continue it.
So we just have to continue it to
the
next
last
time.
one you
Yeah, that's right. So we'll bring it back.
We should have thought of that. We should have rearranged the agenda.
Yeah, we should have. Oh, well. All right.
Okay, that was a good point. Are there any discussion items?
We've got on the agenda what you requested. We brought you the list of, the wish list of zoning ordinance changes. And so if I might walk you through, we've attached our very sort of informal crib sheet to the staff report. So, and if you look, it's broken down, the first possible topics identified during your meetings, and then Commissioner Green's list, and then lastly, staff's wish list. And then if I could start at the very end, you'll see items identified as needed amending development in Ordinance 780. I'm happy to say that all of these are pretty much done or are going to be. To establish a forum for discussion of housing issues. We've held 2. We have the 3rd one coming on the CH to CC, which will be very germane, and particularly assuming that the housing element update is approved next Wednesday at a special meeting. Number 35, that is coming when we develop the town center plan. Consider facilitating community discussions at the town center area's future. That is called for in the general plan, and that was what we will be getting back on track. We got off track during the petition era. Number 36, rezone only 2 acres of the church, Lutheran Church, to PDD zone, and let the applicant initiate PDD zone change. The updated housing element that went to you all on the 11th of this month is going to the council at a special meeting next Wednesday at 7 o'clock in this room for final adoption, hopefully. That articulates beyond any possible doubt that it's just 2 acres that are going to be rezoned. And we have, subsequent to the repeal of 788 via Ordinance 780, we have met with the church's nonprofit that's working to come in with an application. They're not ready yet, but they will be coming in with an application not only for design review on a proposed project for 40 units of senior housing, but for a general plan amendment to rezone the 2 acres of it. And we've actually stipulated, based on the State Department of Housing and Community Development's comment to us after you all blessed the housing element and the CEQA addendum, that we actually put language in that said that if they come in before the rezoning of the PDD, Planned Development District zone, the 2 acres of a church site to PDD, the town will actually not charge for that process. It'll be part of their application, but we technically will just walk it through for them. And then lastly, 37, initiate changes to the general plan to ensure densities of parcels zoned UR7 and UR10 are shown correctly. That was actually what we had considered errata, but we formally amended the general plan housing element in September of 2014 and correct the erroneous, the typographical errors and the numbers relative to those 2 codes. And I would remind you, there were 3 tables listing UR7 and UR10, and it was one of them that had a math error in it. And throughout the rest of the document, it was very clear that there was no intention to rezone the UR7, particularly, or UR7 or UR10 in the housing element, nor in the update. So that has been addressed, the last section. And then lastly, I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for asking us to put this on the agenda tonight with the specific task of triaging this list. And I don't know how much time you want to devote to this tonight, but next Thursday, after the special meeting on Wednesday for the housing element update, Thursday is in this room at 6 o'clock, the workshop on the town's budget. So ultimately, it's the town council's direction on what staff does. They direct the town manager. The town manager is my boss. We sort of have 3 different orbits going on in terms of, desires of what goes on. There's you all in this list. There's the GPIC that's tasked with implementing the general plan, and then there's the town council that actually makes the big decision. So it's timely because what the town manager and I were discussing this afternoon, since we're having the workshop on the budget, it would really be wonderful if you all could pick one handful of these items that you think are priorities, and then in my presentation to the council and the budget workshop next Thursday, I will pass on what you think in this wish list are the most important pieces. And I went through here before tonight's meeting, and I want to just point out that in the first section, under possible topics identified during commission meetings, I'm afraid there was one, Linda, you do a great job. There's no reflection on your keeping the list. But there was one I remember that we really thought about revisiting, and that is how floors are counted in the hillside area. Because our town code right now counts floors, you know, from here to here, you know, instead of in a vertical line. So what it does, it de-incentivizes stepping buildings. So I think that's a very important one. And so in the spirit of triaging this list to go forward, I took the initiative to sort of share with you what I think is we're headed for as priorities already as staff. I mean, the rezoning stuff and the other, there's several items in the general plan housing element that are stipulated that we will be going forward on. One of them, first and foremost, is number 2 on this list, and that's the amnesty ordinance and tangentially updating the second unit ordinance. That's pretty much going to happen. We need to do that technically within a year of next Wednesday if the housing element's adopted. So I would say in terms of staff's priority, a handful of priorities, 5 priorities, that would be a high, perhaps the highest priority on my list. I think under the Commissioner Green's list on number 7, that was referring to the review the parking ordinance with regard to residential districts. I would just throw out the caveat that, again, when we get into the woods on developing a town center plan and we start having workshops, we do have a mandate in the housing element, in the land use element and circulation element to look at the parking in the central commercial area from a comprehensive managed parking approach. Not to demean the potential importance of revisiting the parking requirements in the residential zone. So that's, I just wanted to point out, parking's a big one to me, but with regards to the managed parking downtown, and that is coming. So we do have that on our plate already in terms of our limited staff time, in terms of long-range planning, what we will be doing. So my next pick in the wish list from a staff standpoint would be the second, or how we measure floors, okay? So 1 would be number 2, 2 would be the number, how we measure floors in the residential areas. And then number 9, I think we've continually heard that even though the building code, both in the last 2 updates, which occur every 3 years, has now what's called Cal Green, which sort of preempted what we had been doing at the Marin Climate Energy Partnership level in creating the BURST program. The BURST program went bust because Cal Green preempted us. But there continues to be an interest in going beyond what Cal Green stipulates and creating a little bit more onerous requirements for new structures, potentially 50% remodels, in terms of green building ordinance, because that really gives us the opportunity, particularly with the photovoltaic PACE program that's available now, where you have 0 down, 100% financing, it goes on your taxes. We might be able to really start to address the energy consumption as we go through the more meaty 50% remodels and new buildings. So I think number 9 would be my number 3. And I think actually number 10 folds under that. And
Right,
so
number 10 does, yeah.
Okay, and then so I've got 3 down. I'm going to pick 2 more. This is just to get your juices flowing.
Well,
okay?
can I just mention,
Yeah.
I think item 16 on the second page, the second-story living space, retail below analysis might be combined with your number 1, the second unit ordinance, possibly. Would that work?
This is actually already stipulated. I'm not sure what the code references are here, but we, in the existing housing element and the update, that's part of the strategy for flipping the highway commercial into the central commercial, because it allows second floor residential by right in the CC, whereas it requires a use permit. And again, that's the deal with the state, is that we will follow through on rezoning CH to CC. So 16 is pretty much a done deal, provided we go forward with the rezoning.
Provided, okay.
Can I just finish my 5 for a second and then open it up to you guys? I don't mean to hog it, but I'm glad I'm getting your juices going already. So there's the 2 more that I would sort of throw out there. They're not 100% on, I mean, I think what they would accomplish is saving staff time and applicant time and energy and cost, and that'd be number 21. It is kind of counterintuitive that you all approve a project that calls for taking trees out, but then the applicant's got to go to the tree committee. It sort of sets up what happens. Someone asked a very poignant question. What happens if the tree committee says no and you guys already approved it? I think that's a legal catch-22 that we really should avoid. And one of you is assigned to the tree committee, and it's, I think, only how many people anyway? 4. So I think that makes some sense to visit. And then finally, number 26. You know, a while back, and help me here, Linda, the town re-qualified what was a conforming lot and what wasn't. And it sort of made it so almost every lot in town is a non-conforming lot and needs a use permit, which just adds a lot of time and agony. So those two, the 21 being a legal quagmire and sort of duplication of effort in terms of an applicant coming before a body representing the town, and 26 in terms of a heck of a lot more effort on staff's limited time coming back before you on things that might meet all the other requirements. That would be, again, I don't mean to hog the scene here on that, but those would be my 5 sort of priorities.
It might be in here, but I don't remember. There was one that said if the tables end up not being eliminated. So there had been this conversation around taking those tables out. Is that a separate bullet item?
No, it's in here. And the
Which
tables,
number was that?
And it's
I know we had talked about it, I just didn't see it called out. But that was add Shadow Creek properties to the, if the tables, that's where I noticed it said if the tables end up not being eliminated, and I thought that would have its own separate bullet point, was to eliminate the tables.
we do plan on eliminating the tables.
I would just add that as a specific,
Yeah.
I think we should put it on there, because I think
Yeah,
that would be a
that's
great
fine.
administrative thing to.
That's fine. And again, that is the game plan at this point going
Right.
forward. And I might remind you that the commission that you all passed the emergency homeless shelter ordinance that was passed by the council. And in that exercise in amending the map, in the ordinance that amended the town code with regards to emergency homeless shelters, that was sort of the first little tweak to the zoning map since we went through the petition era. And that's stipulated in that ordinance that the map, when there's a discrepancy, the map prevails. And that's the game plan going forward.
And the other lists that I remember that we had talked about, which I didn't see in here, was there's lists of use permits of things that are allowed in different zones, and some of them are just really antiquated things that literally no longer exist, like arcades or and there was a conversation around changing those lists to be less prescriptive and more universal, like retail, instead of describing dog washing and this kind of retail and that kind of retail. So I would think that would be a good.
Let's put that. This list will continue to
Yeah.
live. So this is not a
Right.
shallow exercise. So I think we should put that back in too.
I would add that back in, because that would give a lot more, that would give, again, it was this idea that you want retail here or this kind of stuff over there,
types.
but exactly, a candy shop here, but a candy shop can't be over here, which is kind of what it says now, is a little too.
And the way I think we discussed it was instead of prescriptive, performance-oriented.
Yes, that's it, prescriptive, performance-oriented versus prescriptive. And then my other last question that I remember we had talked about was, and this may be a huge can of worms or a bunch of them might fall under it, but it had to do with the design review. There's number 17 said defining design review in today's environment. We had talked about form-based codes. I don't know if that's in any of this realm, but could you talk about that a little?
Well, when we get to the town center plan exercise, part of that will be to devise development standards and design guidelines. And that's where, and we actually have quite a bit of background work that as we were headed towards the town center plan workshops, we had actually put together quite a bit going in that direction. And the state of the art on, if you're not familiar with form-based code, is basically an approach where you pure form-based codes, there's no language. It's basically drawings. It's a geometric approach, and it's not about what goes in the building, it's about how the building's oriented. Those have evolved, and I think for a town, my professional opinion for Fairfax is that to take advantage of what has evolved out of this, which is a hybrid approach where you have language and the form base, and it gives you a little bit more nuance, and it's a little bit easier transition for people to adapt to, particularly where local control is such an important thing. In go-go towns where they just want it all and come as fast as you can, that's another story. Here, it's very important to, I believe, develop the design guidelines, development standards and design guidelines. So I think and again, this has to be flushed out through the public process, but as we go into the development of the town center plan, I see us having a section reviewing what hybrid form-based codes are about, and some of the background materials we've already prepared look at those dimensions.
That was what I think that would add a lot of calmness, and I think there's a lot of consensus and agreement about kind of design guidelines, but I don't think it's clearly articulated. So I think if we did have that conversation and people could see, oh, we're all talking about the same kind of look and feel and character of our town, we can all calm down because we all seem to agree and we have it written down. And I think that would be fantastic to have that conversation.
Amen.
Question on the parking. I know you had said the number 7, the review parking ordinance, you differentiated between the residential and the managed parking downtown. I think both are very important, but I do think that they are separate conversations because I would have prioritized that one for the residential, and it could be as simple as allowing tandem parking. The other thing that I don't know if was captured on here was the parking decks not having to have covers. I don't know if that was captured in here, but we've had a number of times.
Number 2 touches a little bit on it, I think.
Second unit?
Well, it's sort of mixed up in there, but it says eliminating, amending the parking requirements. I think there was something else about coverage.
No, this was about, we've had a number of there's covered
it
parking.
in 7.
The issues about covered parking.
It says it in 7.
Okay. So I would prioritize that because there's been a couple of projects recently. We continue to have projects where if there was a little more flexibility on the parking, they could have reconstructed the project so that they didn't have to have the variance of side yard setbacks and those kinds of things. And if they had known ahead of time that there was more options for them with parking, then they might not have even had to come before us. And so I think if we could prioritize that, it seems to me, and I don't have statistics, but we've had a lot of those. We all know we want parking, and we tend to approve tandem parking or smaller size parking. So I would prioritize that one because I think that might eliminate a lot of variance.
And also, there's no magic to the number 5. I mean, if you were to go up in the number of priorities, it's still going to get decided above us. So you all like the idea of number 7, I take it.
Yes, well, I'm the only one left.
You don't have to agree with mine, by the way. You don't have to agree with mine. I just threw out. This is for you to decide tonight.
You frankly picked, of your 5, 3 of them I picked also, so for me. But 7, I would say, is something we really need to address because it takes up a lot of our work, and it doesn't seem that onerous to have to do that.
Great. If it saves staff time, it saves the town money.
Yep.
And the applicant.
Is number 12 and number 5 the same thing? Calling a significant remodel and a 50%? That was another one that we haven't had a lot of them lately, but it seemed to me about 5 years ago there was a whole lot of confusion around the 50% remodel and the significant remodel and the inconsistency between our code and the fire code and how you measured it by the floor or the walls and all that kind of stuff. Are those two, when you wrote this, were those two?
I think that's kind of an adjustment period because we seem to be in sync now, the fire department and us, and when you're saying a problem, do you mean, 50% remodels, your code is set up, the HRD ordinance uses that. If you're doing a 50% remodel, you have to go and get a hill area residential development permit if you're in a hillside landslide area. So, no, it's based on how much of the structure you're structurally affecting.
It's like the walls. Because I remember and I don't think that we've changed our code where the fire department was using one measurement and our code has a different measurement.
No, we're the same now.
How did we get to be the same?
Well, the fire department, no, I think I know what she's talking about.
Yeah.
The fire department for a very short period of time was using some linear method where they would use linear. Well, someone stepped in and told them they can't do that.
So the fire department changed. We
Yes.
didn't change our.
Yes.
So the fire department code changed the way they
And
measured.
I think it was the
that
fire
aligns-
chief came in and said, you can't have a moving target like that. You have to use your definition of 50% remodel. You can't have some other linear method that doesn't exist anywhere in the code. They were doing it to try to be nice. Because their codes are very restrictive now when people get kicked into having to do fire sprinklers. Yeah, so.
I have a question about number 13, the Pastori Willow traffic issues. That's different than the corridor study, right?
Yes, and the interesting part about that when I saw it, in the conditions of approval for the Good Earth, that corner and also Pacheco and Center are the two most challenging, actually Pacheco and Center, or Broadway, if you will, are the two most problematic, lowest performing corners right now. And so when Pastori and, forgive me, Willow, Pastori Willow, sorry, I beg your pardon, I was on the other side of the block. Okay, so that partially got addressed because when you're when you're on when you're on Pastori and you're at the light, and Sir Francis Drake is like this, it used to be you could not turn right on a red, okay?
Correct.
That was relaxed. The traffic committee reviewed it, allowed the right turn, okay, and had to raise the trees over there by the fence of the Good Earth so the line of sight was improved. And when you're coming westbound on Sir Francis Drake, that left turn pocket off of Sir Francis Drake onto Pastori was lengthened.
Oh, yeah.
And
Okay.
the bus stop moved, okay? So that allowed more queuing for the left turns, that then made it easier for the cars going west, continuing west, to go around. So I think a large part of that, maybe there's another piece. Okay.
The lights.
I'm going to bring it up again.
Okay, good.
And I have in the past. And
Okay.
I contemplated making this my usual. I even thought I'm going to come to the town council meeting with my 3 minutes at the podium every time for the next however many months, because I really, 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 I drive out of here, I drop my daughter off at the bus stop every morning, and if I leave here at 7:38 or 7:36, it's completely different traffic situation than 7:41. And I watch the light timing and then on the way back in. And so I have been watching the timing of the lights at the Pastori Willow and then the other one with the pizza place and the new exercise place. Those two lights there, it's not working. There's lots of blank cars where everyone's backed up waiting, and then there's this big blank spot, and then the lights change. So I really, really think we need those two lights. And I think there was something that changed when the lighting was changed with that turn when Good Earth went in, and they changed the flow. But I think we need to fix it because it's creating a sense of traffic that is exacerbated and is trickling over into other decision areas around. Traffic has gotten so much worse because of other things. I have a hunch that traffic has gotten worse because the timing of those lights has changed, not because all kinds of other stuff in our community. I mean, there's other stuff, but...
Okay, if you recall, the good news was that actually San Anselmo got a grant to look at that stretch, because it's not only our jurisdiction at this corner, it's their lights in the other. So I've lost track. I don't have the bandwidth to keep up with everything, but I do occasionally meet with their public works director, and we're both on the transit corridor study, so I meet regularly with him at the Technical Advisory Committee meetings, and you've tweaked me to circle back to him to find out, okay, what's going on and how soon before we can get those lights coordinated. Having said that, I'm taking a leap of faith here saying that they're going to coordinate those lights because we don't know what happens further downstream that might be part of why they are slowing you down. I don't know. I just don't have access. I'm not privy to that study yet.
I would suggest that we prioritize that before getting into the town center conversation. I mean, the traffic conversation seems to trickle into so many others that I would suggest we move on that fairly quickly.
Again, we've got the study that is being led by San Anselmo that I'll find out about. We are also headed towards a traffic forum, which you all promoted, if you recall, and there were some traffic counts done when school started in the fall. And I've got license now to start David Parisi back up so that we can head towards conducting the traffic forum for exactly the reason you said, because people are up in arms. It's like we're not even growing and the traffic's getting worse. And of course, we know from the demographic studies from the census of 2010 versus 2000, we've become a much more white-collar, upper-scale income community, which ripples into the amount of traffic. Both people are leaving for San Francisco, and the architect, the babysitter, the au pair are coming in, and things change from those economic dynamics. So we're headed for that. So I will follow up with San Anselmo on the study, and I think, again, we have license, and I have it in my budget, which hopefully be headed towards approval on Thursday, to conduct the traffic forum. So there'll be another opportunity. I think that would be more effective to stand up and continually add your 2 cents at that exercise, if we don't get some immediate results from what the study is showing.
And it would be great to have that study information for the traffic forum.
I will try to find out from their public works director, who's, by the way, a very good guy.
Can I just throw in one other thing to ask your traffic people that might also be impacting it? There's the new California law for the driver's license requirements for new drivers, i.e. high school drivers, where they can't carpool for their first year of driving. And I don't wonder if there might also be some residual impact on the number of high school students, i.e. Sir Francis Drake drivers, that may also have an impact. I don't know how you would go about finding out that, but that is a new legislative policy change that has recently been enacted that could be having some impact on that specific area as well.
Okay,
new drivers can't drive somebody else in their car when they turn, so.
Just to get us back on track here for a moment, what I'm hoping to get from you all tonight is a short list of the highest priority. This list will live on, and we've caught a couple of what they call in Hawaii pukas, missing pieces, and so we'll add those back in. And I've heard a couple of things discussed so far in your list, and at some point I think you're going to have to sort of cut off discussion and come to an agreement on what you want. And in an effort sort of steering you that way, let me just sort of tell you, if I was going to create a composite between what I've said and what I've heard from you all so far, and I was going to wave the magic wand at this point in time and sort of get us started on that list, I would say that number 2 is up there in the top tier. What I talked about and how we count floors is up there in the top tier. The green building ordinance is in the top tier. The review of the parking ordinance, I would actually slide ahead of the other ones I had on the other page. So there's 4 right there, right? Okay. And then turning the page, I don't know if you want to include 21 and 26, but there is a lot of economy of scale in revisiting those things. And they're not that, the tree thing is not that onerous. It's just a matter of amending the code after some public discussion about it. And 26 could be pretty onerous, actually. So I would put that sort of down on the list, but I would include 21 at this point. And there would be 5 right there, actually.
Can I ask a question about 21? Can you require that the removal permit, the tree removal permit, be done before?
That's an interesting twist.
but
Yeah.
they have to go through the exercise not knowing that they're going to be able to do the
Right.
project.
If they can approve it before they come before us, then it's.
That's very interesting. I think you should discuss that idea. Do you have an opinion, Linda?
It used to be before.
Oh, it did? Oh, it did, it used to be.
For whatever reason, we ended up having trees getting cut, you know.
In lieu of a permit.
Well, they would get their approval for the tree permit and they would cut. And even if they conditioned it upon them getting their discretionary approval. So it used to be before the redoing of the tree ordinance is when they put it after.
And forgive me, this is a little bit unusual, but let me ask you, what do you think about giving the commission the ability?
I think it's a really good way to go because the commission has to, you know, they have to base their decisions on the impacts to the site,
right,
including removal of trees.
And-
It always
yeah.
seemed to me like it's a double step. I
What,
mean,
and what about this? I'm just thinking out loud now with you. What if we included in our noticing the members of the tree committee, so they could come and be a part of this if they had any concerns about the tree?
well, I don't know. I think we'd have to ask the attorney about that. But I don't see why the planning commission couldn't act for trees that are coming out because of development, that it would go to and then trees that were just coming out because they're sick
And by the
or
way, we
whatever
don't have
would go
to
to
figure
the
out,
tree committee.
and we're not, tonight's not to figure out how to do this, it's just to make it a priority.
Yeah,
Right,
it's a priority for me.
based on just real quick here, based on some of the recent discussions we've had with developments and trees, I think we need to keep hearing those points, because things change, like tree number 30 or whatever, you know, it got saved because of the discussion we had here. So, but for trees that are just looking for a permit to remove it because it's dying, then I think that might work. So that would relieve a lot of cost.
Can I ask if anyone remembers what number 18 is all about? Transport planning, was this,
I think it was transportation. I think it was the circulation and the traffic forum and transportation, like planning of circulation and transportation, is that?
Oh, remember we used to have the informal staging area for trucks down before the Good Earth came in? I'm wondering if that was transport.
That was one of mine, and I threw it in.
That's yours.
Just, yeah, I threw it in just because I had remembered that we were discussing it. But, you know, actually, it's part of the general plan anyhow.
And the
So
circulation and
I wouldn't put that in the priority list.
Okay.
But
should we leave it on? And leave it on?
Leave it on for now.
Okay.
You know,
And it's supposed to be transportation plan.
move it down to 37 or 38.
I would also, just for sake of clarity, just combine all of 19, 23, and 24, all have to do with time limits and expiration time periods. I think that could be just one discussion.
19?
19, 23, and 24 all have to do with setting time limits on applications and use permits and design review. I think that should be we should have one unified conversation on time limits for various pieces, and that might just streamline dealing
We can
with
revise
that.
the list on that. Again, but I think we have 5. I think we have a consensus on 5 right now.
Well, I haven't weighed in at this point.
Because our lists are different. 26, not including 26, just 21. So what I've got is 5, and let me just take a whack at prioritizing them. 1 is the second unit amnesty ordinance. 2 is how we count floors. 3 is the green building ordinance. 4 is the review parking ordinance. And 5 would be the tree issue.
So I'm assuming with that, the traffic forum is just ongoing anyway, so that doesn't have to be one of those 5. That's good. Can I just throw out the idea that on number 11, in addition to, and I'm not quite sure, I don't know what the history is of number 11, where what was being thought about, but it reads ordinances to preserve the natural state of the area, and based on conversation I had with someone who wanted to suggest that we think about The historic, defining the historic character, sort of what that means. Just wondered if maybe we could roll that in there if it doesn't conflict with whatever that meant.
Two things. I mean, if you want to expand that number 11 in the list, that's perfectly great. Just two heads up on this. At the May 6th May 6th Town Council meeting, the Open Space Committee, with a subcommittee led by Mimi and Jack Jenkins, they have taken upon themselves to apply for enhanced what's called priority conservation areas. Back in '07, ABAG created priority development areas and priority conservation areas. And the county actually created up on the ridge over here sort of a big blob on a map, which was the first cut at a priority conservation area. And now Mimi and Jack, with the help of our consultant Sean Kennings, have enhanced a map showing, which is partly overlaying the existing priority conservation area, and the council asked them to go back and make some modifications to the map, which just came in this morning, as a matter of fact, and that's going to be heard to get it complete, because it has to be submitted by Friday, that's going to be heard at the budget workshop meeting on Thursday. In fact, I just finished the staff report for that. And so that goes a long ways towards maintaining all the unbuilt areas, and it's a very tricky thing to not include folks like the Town and Country Club, where the owner's saying this creates a cloud on title and is very upset, so that was taken out, and the new map sort of articulates what's in and what's out a little bit better, but it's supposed to be general. The second thing is, with regards to historic preservation, that's actually part of the conservation element. And it is part of the, 498 programs in the matrix that you created, that you two helped finalize at our retreat for putting the finishing touches on the general plan back in 2012. So it's a touchy issue, historic preservation, throughout the county. But we do have a mandate in the conservation element to start to create a list of at least the most important resources in town. I think, so one is how I read this is in regards to the natural area. The good news is that Mimi and Jack and via the Open Space Committee are moving forward with beefing up with further grabbing, and this goes beyond the town boundary also. The new blobs, if you will, of priority conservation areas go into the unincorporated area also in our sphere of influence. And the county is blessing it too, also in their, we have to go to San Selmo and the county when we go out and get their blessing, which we're getting in.
Eventually, it will trickle down and become an ordinance in the zoning ordinance.
No, it's just the only thing that the priority conservation areas do is make it, when funding becomes available,
okay,
and then you can go and, if you want to, if it's for sale, then you can purchase properties.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, I thought the commission wanted something on here that eventually there would be a portion of the zoning ordinance that would set forth how you approach development of a historic building in town. There's not going to be something.
Great.
I thought eventually.
That's great. I'm just saying that is in the conservation element at this point, to create an ordinance that deals with historic preservation.
That's what I'm saying. So it should stay on this list.
I would put that. I would articulate on this list. I think it should be on this list. I think it's very important. I just want to warn you that. It's going to be a while. Yeah, and it requires political will, because a lot of people don't like to have to concern themselves with this. And since we're talking about it, and you know this, Norma, from your experience, when municipalities do this the right way as stipulated in CEQA and state law, if an applicant comes in and their building is over a certain age, I think it's actually 50 years old, then you have to have an architectural historian come and look at it. And the first cut can be a few $1,000 just to have this person come, do the research. Did anyone significant live there? What's the history of the building? Is it in its original state? So now you got about $5,000. And if you're lucky, then you're done. But that's an onerous requirement. If it's just a tear down, I mean, we've got some shacks here that to some people they're worth saving, to other people they're, why would you want that? On the other hand, we've got the Diaz house, we've got the historic downtown. I mean, we've got the whole downtown, in my opinion, should be a historic district with design requirements. But anyway.
Is that the Tenalima property, the Dias house?
It's on Tenolima, yeah.
Right.
And, I mean, that house is not only valuable because of its physical shape, it's the granddaughter of the Spanish soldier who was given the land grant for this area. Marin lived in it. So let me just finish. So we have a mandate in the conservation element to create a list, a town's list. There's sort of tiers of lists. There's local lists, there's state, and then federal. And if by the way, if that architectural historian says, like I'm sure someone would on the Diaz house, that yes, this is a historic resource and it should not be touched or modified, the next step for somebody, if they say no, we want to tear it down, is to do an EIR. No. And so the next step is a full-blown EIR to ride overriding conditions where there's an imperative to bring it down. It's very complicated and expensive. So it requires political will. I think the first step is a historic inventory, and that would be a good thing to sort of get people to wake up that you can lose them and that these things are valuable to town, and there will be some really heartfelt conversations because you're talking with people's perceived development rights. You know, so here again, a lot of our job here as staff and you is balancing individual rights against the collective rights and
Right.
individual against individual.
But it's important, if we identify historic buildings, that they get listed on the California, I forget exactly what it's called, the California list of historic buildings.
Yeah.
Because of density bonus requirements and things that we can, that we can kind of reserve those properties that way. We have to, that's got to be the goal, is to get them listed formally and then move on with them.
So I have a process question to keep us moving along. We've been looking at the content. I know in the past, not in the recent past, but in the past, you know, we did form ad hoc subcommittees to work on things to help keep things moving along. And I know that you guys are super busy with lots of stuff. So I was wondering, one, did you have an idea of how to move these forward, and wanted to suggest the possibility, I believe we can have 2 members on an ad hoc committee without having to notice everything. So this came to mind, while I think the green building ordinance is a great priority, it's also a big ticket item. I mean, it's a big nut to crack. Some of these are smaller, some of these are larger. But my suggestion was that we might take the ones that we've prioritized and create subcommittees to flesh them out a little bit, to bring them back, so that we're not having to wait for you all to have the time to do that. If that's...
I think it's a great idea, with the caveat that I still take my directions from the town manager, who gets his direction from the council, and the process that we're in right now is to create your priority list. Then I take it forward to them, and we sort of all get on the same page. And then as part of my recommendation, as part of my discussion with them in this room next Thursday night would be, and one great idea coming out of the commission was that to help facilitate this happening and ease our limited bandwidth, to create ad hoc committees to help facilitate the creation.
Well, I would love, I mean, I don't know if we need to vote on or consensus to direct staff to do that, because I think that would help move them along. And great, we're all nodding our heads, please.
Yeah, the only expense there would be some pizza.
I would be glad to do that on my budget, as long as I have some too.
And I would really enjoy being on the ad hoc committee for some of this, because I like crafting ordinance language, so it would be great.
It's lawyer's disease.
So I think you have 5, and the only other one that
I have
dropped,
6. I have 6. I think.
You have 6. The only other one that seemed to drop
Oh, no,
off
5.
was the parking, the Pastori Willow traffic issues, and
But I went sideways on you in that. I said I'm going to find out about San Anselmo, and we have the parking forum coming.
So and I'm sorry, not parking, traffic. The traffic
forum.
So that'll be folded in.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think there's an easier way to get off the dime on that one.
Could you list your 6.5
Sure.
again, please?
Okay, so I'm looking at number 2 on your list for second unit amnesty ordinance. Right above that, I just wrote in how we count floors in residential zones. I think that's pretty, it's a sleeper. It's, to me, I put it right up there under the second unit in the amnesty ordinance because it's really an important influence on the physical form of the town. I know, and they didn't do it, but people I don't think understand why it's a benefit. It's less massing counting this way. I think it was an ignorant decision myself, and I wasn't here when it happened. Then number 3, I would say the energy issue of the green building ordinance, which also gets into the solar world, which is really evolving quickly, and gets right down to the LED lights too, Bruce, that you mentioned. And so that's number 3. And then 4, the review parking ordinance with regards to residential, and then 5 would be number 21, which really has some symmetry to it. And I guess we're talking about going back to the old way, which is, I mean, I'm not sure if you landed squarely on this, but Esther's idea of doing the, either the tree committee ahead of time would be Esther's possibility, and or just giving you all the license to decide.
You know, maybe they could even defer, you know, if it is because of a project and impacts, maybe they say, well, we'll defer to the planning commission, but it's maybe a prerequisite, you know, for them to do a cursory review before they come before us.
Maybe they don't get the permit. I mean, the problem was, Linda said, when they get that, even if it's conditioned on the entitlements, people then go right ahead and cut. So I don't know how you can beef it up so that they know that it's 2 stops, it's not 1. But it's up to you guys how you want to handle it. I mean, it's a lot cleaner just taking ownership.
Problem with our processing time limits too, you know? You can't tell someone that they can't submit a hill area residential development permit if they submit and we have a certain amount of time. What do you do if they haven't gotten their I guess you make it a condition of approval. I think in terms of
transparency in government, you all are a lot more on people's radars than the tree committee. You know, if the camera's not going, it's a much...
We all say yes, it's on the list. Can we talk about it when we talk about it?
Yeah.
Because the only other one I wanted to ask about that we added was eliminating the tables in the town code. And the only reason why I might prioritize that is with any reason, like, is that something that we might want to do as a procedural thing before dealing with rezoning stuff, rather than, would that help any of that process coming down the pike to change it from just so that it's not, is that?
Now, so I want to make sure I understand when you're talking about the tables. There's the tables that list the APN numbers, and that's what we're targeting for elimination. Okay.
Those are the tables, and that's just it's just a formatting thing in my mind. It doesn't, like you said, we already have language in there that says the map presides, which says the map so if we have it that says the map presides, then let's just get rid of the tables because the map presides.
The only caveat is, as we go through the exercise of bringing the zoning ordinance into compliance with the housing element, that's when it's sort of the cleanest to do it at that time, so you're not duplicating the effort. We're going to be changing the map for each of the zone changes, and we're going to come in with those changes on the map and the language in the code, so everyone's comfortable as we go through with the CH2CC, with the 2 sites.
No, I get it, but what's happened before is when you take a parcel out of this table because it's going from that zone to this zone, then you have to, there's a lot of that, that's where a lot of, if we did it ahead of time and just got rid of the tables, then when we go to do the rezoning, we're just dealing with the map.
Just saying the map prevails.
And we're just dealing with the map. When you go to do the rezoning, then we're just dealing with the map. We don't have to have any of that monkey business about, are the tables correct? Did you take it out of here and put it into there?
Jim, I thought they talked about that, and it was like a decision that they thought that if they eliminated them just all at once when we were going through this, it would be too much of a shock on some of the citizens, so they left it in there. But the ultimate plan is to get rid of them.
You can put it on the list, and you can put it on your priority list.
I personally think it would just clean up, it would clean up the rezoning conversation, because you wouldn't have this table
So what do you want to lose from your 5 and put that in instead?
Or do you want to
Or
make it
just want to
number
put it on the
6?
list, or you want to put it on the priority list?
I would put it on the, it's, town council's going to have to
So it's a
decide.
6,
So if
number
they
6.
don't want to do it, they don't want to do
Number
it.
6.
Number 6.
Number 6, eliminate the tables, the APN tables.
Yeah.
Make it a priority. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, and I think the politics are going to come into play on this, but that's fine.
I think it would make it cleaner process.
We'll put it on number 6.
I don't totally agree with that, eliminating tables. I mean, if you have a cross-reference, it sometimes is a good idea. The problem I have with the map is the definition, I mean, the pixels in the map you're looking at. And some of them are really tiny, and some of them we can blow up. And that's the issue with me. A table is there, it's in black and white, it's printed, and we just have to, and as long as they're there, we just have to coordinate the map and the tables and make sure they're correct.
I'm going to.
Sorry, but.
It's number 6 for discussion.
Fine,
It's not-
let's leave it on for discussion and
so,
kind of let the town council
Because
more or less.
I understand what Phil's saying. Sometimes the graphics, when we've redone the zoning map, parcels have inadvertently gotten in the wrong zone. So there is a reason that they.
But likewise, to play the devil's advocate, but we also have APNs that show up in 2 zones.
And when you have things listed in multiple places, you get inconsistencies where you change it in one and you forgot, I forgot to change it on page 23.
The real downside to using the APNs is that the county tax assessor changes them at will, and they don't stay the same. And we have no control over when they change the numbers.
Well, you can't change the physical place where the thing is, so.
Right. It's sort of like the form-based code in the mapping system.
Right,
But
but
let's have that discussion. Let's just have the discussion. Okay, so, go. So, let's see. So number 6 is eliminate tables. Okay, are we there? Okay, while Linda packs up, I think the next item is mine.
Do we need to entertain a motion on this, or just this informal discussion?
Do I have nodding heads on the 6?
Yes, aye.
6, we added the one. Yeah, okay, cool. All right, so I think the last item is my report. I'm going to be really brief because I'm brain dead.
Okay, planning director's report.
So heads up, at the May 6th Town Council meeting, we got licensed to create the next Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and they actually assigned Renee and John to be on the committee because they were on the last BPAC, which stands for Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee. So there's going to be 6 appointments. So if you know anybody that's good out there in the pedestrian and bike world that wants to be a part of the process and updating the pedestrian and bicycle master plan, which is what this exercise is about, please send them towards Town Council member John Reed or Vice Mayor Renee Goddard. And the kickoff to the process is being led by the Transportation Authority of Marin to update the last jurisdictions that need updating. That would be the county, Tiburon, San Anselmo, and ourselves. That process is kicked off already, and the first public scoping session, which will deal with existing conditions, is going to be Saturday morning, June 6th at Drake High School from 10 to 12, and it will cover both San Anselmo and Fairfax, and the consultants for TAM, Alta, with their sub-consultants, which include David Parisi. That'll be their show on the existing conditions. And we do have a survey that John and Renee will help me start to answer questions about in terms of what has been implemented in the last plan. And then when the full BPAC is convened, what are the priorities for the town as the representatives of the town? What do they think the priorities are? The first, again, scoping session will be June 6th in the morning at Drake. Please feel free to go. It's fine. Okay, we're almost done. I'll be brief. Okay, so that's coming. As I mentioned before, a special meeting of the Town Council next Wednesday at 7 o'clock for entertaining the adoption of the housing element and accepting the addendum to the mitigated neg deck. Then the next day is the budget workshop. We'll all be presenting your 6 priorities as well as the budget for our department. And let's see what else. And we're headed towards the traffic forum. We still have the CH to CC number 3 of the general plan forums. And right now, I can't think of much else except to say I had an incredible week in Oslo, got back night before last. And boy, I cannot tell you about the transportation system there and how cool it is. It's just incredible. It is so wonderful. I mean, there are buses flying by every few minutes, little narrow streets. There's cars that just have a free reign, and I don't know where everyone parks, but there's very limited parking. Where there is parking, it's like usually 15 minutes, and then they go disappear in some garage. And there's pedestrians. There's a bike rental program that is so cool, where you check the bike out and you ride to another place, you put it back in, and the trucks come along and pick it up. There's even double-deck bike parking stalls, where the top thing, you sort of pull this thing back, put your bike in, push it back up. Ferries. I lucked out because Sunday turned out to be their National Independence Day, like their 4th of July from independence from Denmark. And it was like, of a country of 5 million people, I swear there were 4 million kids in the parade marching to the Royal Palace, waving at the royal family. It was just amazing. I've never seen more bars and cafes per square meter anywhere in my life, and particularly full and hopping. And one of the takeaways from being there, and I'm sorry, I'll be done in just a second, was, you're so far up north. You read about it, but you forget. We're not even at the longest day of the year. The sun goes down at 10 and it comes up at 4:30. It was twilight at 11:15, 11:30. It was the weirdest thing. And the bars don't get going till 11, and they don't stop till 4. The bar noise would just stop, and I look out the window, and it's twilight. It was amazing. But it's just a gorgeous country. And they're not part of the EU. They have the highest per capita income because of their natural resources of gas and oil. And it's a socialist country, so everybody's got a base of living, which, to my mind, actually feeds into the capitalist activity, the economic activity, because people know they're going to survive and they can risk on entrepreneurial activities. And then lastly, the other takeaway is, I look around at the cool kids walking around and the young folks, and what are they wearing? They're wearing Converse tennis shoes, which came from California, Levi's that came from the gold rush, and mountain bikes that came from Fairfax. So we influence the world in the West here. And with that, I'll end my report.
Speaking of mountain bikes, Drake just won state championships in mountain biking.
Oh, wow. And by the way, coincidentally, the Mountain Bike Museum is opening on June 6th, which is the day of the first public scoping session on updating the bike and pedestrian plan. Synchronicity strikes again.
Excellent. Yes, I think that Europeans are somewhat ahead of us in some of the transport and
9% of their GNP on transportation. Their gross domestic
what's their tax
GDP.
rate, however? I mean,
Yeah, well, and by the way, when someone's speeding in the downtown, I just heard this from somebody I know, they based a fine based on how much the people have and how much they make. I heard of a guy speeding in the downtown. He was like whipping in like 50 miles an hour and 25. They fined him $10,000.
That's more like Mexico.
That's what we should do.
All right. So may I entertain a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Thank you for a great meeting. And by the way,
Seconded?
welcome Bruce
Seconded?
and Norma. Welcome Bruce and Norma, our
Yes,
new commissioners.
welcome, Bruce and Norma.
Thank you so much.
for joining us.